You can hear this. You are not alone. This is the Resistance.
What's up, everyone? Hitman with the Resistance. If you're watching this, you are the Resistance. Everybody remember the old anonymous opener? We are anonymous. We are Legion. It's kind of interesting. Their whole thing was the emphasis of anonymity. Nobody knew who was behind the mask. And me personally, I was one of the few dumbasses who took the mask off and made myself a target. But there are plenty of people out there who were already targets who are now trying to just maintain their anonymity. And we got one of those individuals here today. She's got a very, very, for lack of a better term, unique story to tell and correlation to why she's trying to live such a private life, maintain her anonymity, even though she has nothing to actually do with anonymous or their ideas. She definitely encompasses the idea of, wanting to remain anonymous, keep her face and her name and her personal life out of the public eye and just try to live a normal life as best she can. And a little bit of background. This is a personal friend of Revan's. Her name, we're just simply going to call her Noble. And Revan, you have known this woman for a little while now.
5 years.
The backstory to this, about 5 years. The backstory here is just completely off the wall. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, gang stalking. We've talked about this in the past. A lot of people are becoming victims of gang stalking, DOD attacks, swatting, so forth. We've heard a lot about swatting recently in the media with people like Alex Jones and others being swatted. Alex Jones's, one of his employees, Jamie White, was recently murdered as a subsequent result of what may have been gang stalking as well. So this is a very serious issue, and it's only gaining traction and in ways that most people can't even begin to imagine. So, Revan, Noble, I'm going to go ahead and give it to you guys. Connor and I will just chime in here and there if we got any thoughts, questions, or whatever. But for the most part, go ahead, Revan, Noble. The floor is yours.
Okay. To any viewers who are watching this, please show some respect here. And this is very, very serious matter to understand. So please respect. Okay, now this is my dear friend Noble. Been friends for 5 years. Dear friend, and this is gonna be the first interview she's having here on TWWRN, and we're gonna go ahead and darling, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey guys. Hello, everybody. I'm just honored to be here. I watched the stream too, and I love that you guys are just so forthcoming and you discuss difficult topics that are not being discussed, unfortunately, by a lot of the population. I mean, some people refer to them as NPCs, bots, sheeple, but these people that are in the matrix, right? They're hanging on. They're waiting for the next Dancing with the Stars to come out on Thursday, and that's what they look forward to. Some. But that's when you're in the matrix, and I can admit, that I was one of those individuals that I guess I think I could be referred to as a person that was. I fell back asleep after working where I worked. I fell back asleep. It was one of the most traumatizing jobs I've ever had in my life. And I'll try not to get upset. And it's been very traumatic. And I can honestly tell you, I don't always with finding out that I was in this program is pretty horrifying. It's kind of something that you, but so I go by Noble. I've gone by, certain various, whatever. I mean, I've had handles because, when you are in this, especially when you're a female, I mean, you get some of the attention you don't want from, certain other targeted, males, and sometimes females. So, you in there, it can be very predatory within the community, because these individuals, right, that some, not all, there are predatory, there are predators within the TI community as well, and certainly not all. But they, there's a lot of these, there's, some guys, right, they know when you're targeted, they know that we can't, as a targeted female, we can't go to the police, so I can't say that enough, a handful that I've met, will use that to their advantage, right? Because what they're looking for, this is just the some that I've met. This is not all males in the TI community, certainly not. But there's a lot, there's some that are just out there for nefarious reasons, nefarious reasons. They're looking to exploit the situation from the targeted female, and they're looking for sex, shelter, money. So and that's a really bad situation. That a lot of the targeted females, that we face. Somebody, I don't know if it's someone's mic's on. It's just some, I don't need to, I don't know. It's just feedback. That's probably Grim. Probably Revan. So
It usually is.
Okay, it's just I don't know whose mic's on, if it's my feedback or something, but
Hold on. Hold on.
There we go. Oh, I think we got it. And
problem solved.
Problem solved. It's never, when you have streams like this, it's it's never going to go perfect. It is what it is. That's what we're dealing with. But let me give you a little backstory on me. So, and how I got into this community, which, I cringe when I say these two words together, like targeted and community, because people want to be a part of a loving, caring community, but they don't want to be targeted. So this is like an oxymoron. It's kind of like these two words that the CIA, just put together and threw out there like gang stalking to make us all sound crazy. Targeted individual, it makes us all sound crazy. I guess apparently we're all suffering the same illusion. We're all seeing the Zertzing happening to us, the Stasi, and I don't want to go too ahead of myself here. So, and I'm going free thought. I don't have any notes or anything. So regarding going back to the targeted community, there really is no, and I can tell you, there is a targeted community on YouTube, but with, and then you have certain people who have a lot of followers, but there's really not, unless you're in a clique, it can be kind of cliquey, and it's not even good to say that, because you can get blacklisted very quickly in this, this quote unquote community, because they're really, you're looking at a community that, I mean, no one asked. You're looking at a bunch of people that never asked to be in a community like this. No one would ever want to be in a community like this, because we are very bruised and battered people. We are getting tortured. We are getting tortured. Yep.
Question.
Sure.
You said a lot of women are winding up targets of this. Now, we understand why people like TWRN or people like Alex Jones, who naturally seek out the spotlight, would be targeted, or even politicians like Donald Trump being targeted. Why would the average individual, because you weren't really involved, from what I understand, you weren't really involved in the geopolitical arena. You weren't involved in media or exposing any sort of government corruption or anything like that. You were just an average woman doing her job. So what makes for a targeted individual on an independent level. How does the average person, how does the average Joe, especially a woman, wind up a target of gang stalking and DOD attacks?
Well, I did at one point work. I used to work for the government when I was younger, you know, and there was a point when I was in my 30s that I had to push back, right? I had to speak truth to power because there was no way in hell that I was going to I'll wait. You're going to shut up those. Let me tell you, I talked to Grim about the notifications because let me tell you, when you're targeted, nothing is coincidence. And what they want to do is they try to get you unfocused because we live in a world that's all surveillance. Surveillance. Even if you don't think you're being surveyed, you are. And I'm telling you, once I get through telling you how badly you're surveyed, there's the average person would pee a little in their pants because it's scary. It's scary. So let me finish what I'll wait. Because I would greatly appreciate if I go into it. All I ask is just, the notifications, because I know Grim likes his notifications. And, again, there's when you hear boo-doo-doo-doo-doo, at a crucial moment, boo-doo-doo-doo-doo, and you get a notification. Let me tell you what that isn't. It's called plausible. It is called plausible deniability, but I'll tell you what it isn't. It isn't a coincidence. And in a targeted person's life, right? Because I had to do, I've remained on the right side of history. And that's why I'm in this slow kill program, because I spoke truth to power in my 30s. And now, they want to make sure I regret it to the day I die. So I know that this is something that's very dangerous for me to do, but it's something that, right now, I've never, let's see. So I'm trying to think where I want to, make sure I go with this. And it's just hard because once I'm interrupted, it's just so hard because what they do too is they try to attack your memory. Okay. And I don't know if I can say DEWs, but they're a very real thing, very real. So a lot of people forget though, let me digress for a second. A lot of people don't understand that if they can hit a place in Maui and if they can, hit a place in California, and they can just try to bring in, right? They're going to bring in all these 15-minute cities. They can sure as hell hit you. All right. And it's going to look very different when they hit you. Okay. It's going to be death by 1,000 paper cuts. You're going to not even know it. You're going to feel an itch, or you're going to feel a pinprick on your finger, a pinprick on your foot, your toe, and you're not even going to know it. So other than that, other feeling a little bit, what was that? Then, and then you start to research, especially how I realized that. And again, let me digress. I'm very proud of what I had to do when I worked for a certain agency. But and it was the only reason I didn't think to myself, well, here I go. I'm going to change the world. I didn't have any kind of cap. I didn't want any, I just didn't want to, I I wasn't going to hurt anybody. I didn't want to harm anybody. I had just come back from this cancer treatment myself. Unfortunately, I lost my breast. I was around, this was like a very, there were a lot of occupational hazards in this job, and when I had to get my own, I had to get cancer treatment. I walked, I had to go back into that unhealthy, dangerous job. And then I was asked to, well, okay, it's going to be business as usual. And wait a second. I didn't sign up for a job I'm not going to harm anybody. I refuse to harm anyone. So once I out on cancer treatment, I started just research. And I researched, machines, and I researched, things from, I researched Lockheed Martin. I researched L3 Technologies. I researched, the machines that I was around. And once I knew where, wait a second, I don't understand this, something is very off here. I went back to that job just with new eyes. I went back to that job with, eyes to see and ears to hear, and that wasn't very popular. But you got to remember that I was in my 30s, right? So I was full of spit and vinegar. So no one was going to say, hey, look, now we're asking you to do this, and this is what you're going to do. Well, no, you're not. You're not going to ask me to do that. I'm certainly not going to put anybody in harm's way after, especially coming back from. I just want to just finish it. Just especially, I was going to say is especially when I just came back from cancer treatment. Go ahead.
So basically, to summarize what you're saying is you became a target because you refused to go back into that situation, or because you were going to blow the whistle on things that were going on within that organization.
You know, when I went in, yeah, I had to go back. There wasn't really an option of me. And also, I was suffering from Stockholm syndrome, too. You know, I had a pretty bad case of Stockholm syndrome. And it definitely wasn't that I was in love with my captors. I was afraid of my captors. You know, so, and again, I was very young. I was very green. I already had, you know, had been in a position before I found that. This was started in 2002. You know, I went in there in my, you know, when I was pretty young, but I was in a government job. I was in a volunteer position, you know, and it was a volunteer position where I was helping individuals that were, you know, I'm going to, you know, that were a lower income and facing very difficult situations on their own. And you know, I signed up to do this and volunteer for the government, and you know, and because I wanted to be part of the solution and not the problem, and that's how my parents raised me. I loved it. You know, this government job, the volunteer work that I did was like it was just this. I loved it, you know, and it was just the most rewarding job I ever had in my life. You know, I was so, you know, I just loved it. I was so passionate about it. So they signed me on for another year. And then I got to work more so. I got to do other things that I loved, helping more people that were disenfranchised. And I loved it. You know, I loved helping the underdog because I've grown up, I've always been the underdog, you know, so it just gave me, it was just passion. I loved it. And then of course, so when 9/11 happened, you know, I was working for a shelter, a women's shelter, and I was doing volunteer work there. And this was in New England, and that's when 9/11 happened. The buildings came down, you know, and you know, before even going to that job, I remember I was getting ready, and my mother. I lived with my parents, right, because this was a job where I was trying to help people, right, so it wasn't making much money. If you want a job that helps people, you're not going to make much money, and this was back in, you know, so this was the yeah, so you know, she said, called me in and she said, you know, a building just fell, and you know, and we were all in shock, and I was watching, and you know, and from that, you know, it's just my life was never the same. It was out of coincidence that you know, so now I'm going to college, and I'm moving forward, right? So that was devastating to see, but I'm moving on with my life. I'm in college, and then I have a security job, and you know, and I don't mean to be all over the place. This is just kind of traumatic to talk about, but you know, I saw this job because going to school. I was going to school full time and going to work full time, and I really was just burning myself out. So I talked to my boss, who I admired. He was one of my mentors, and I suggested to him. I said, "Look, I can't do this. I'm getting burned out really quick, you know, because I'm doing these double shifts and I'm on salary, right? So, you know, I had to do shifts that, you know, I was on salary, and the officers were. It was like, you know, they were making like 10 an hour, and they would just dip out for a Super Bowl." And then I would end up doing double shifts back to back, you know, where I'm doing, you know, 7 a.m. to 1500 to 2300. So I was getting burned out, and then I'd have to go to college. I'd have to go to classes in the morning. So I just was getting super, super burned out. And I asked him, you know, I hated leaving that job so badly, but I said, "What do you think I should do?" I said, could you give me some advice? What do you think? And he just said to me, he looked at me and he said, he said, "I understand that this is difficult to do, full-time school and full-time job." He said, "But you know what? You know, you're good at what you do. You know, you're a people person. You're good at your job. Never demote yourself. Never demote yourself." I always remember he told me that. Never demote myself. And I remember that. So after 9/11 happened, you know, all I did was apply for George W. Bush put out that all the airports needed to be federalized by 1 year. This was something that also Senator Gary Hart signed on to. It was something that George Bush declined first, and then he looked at it again, a policy, something that was Gary Hart's idea, supposedly, right? This is the story that we hear as American citizens. And so I applied. I applied. There wasn't many females doing what I was applying for, and that was a little intimidating. It was mostly guys, in a certain position. But he said never demote yourself, so I wasn't going to demote myself, so I was interviewed about 3 times. And that was, because remember, they were federalizing all the airports and so I didn't really expect to be called. I was interviewed by the feds. They had it was very intimidating, these interviews. And I was such a laid back person. I was such, I wanted to be, all my friends would always tell me, you should be a comedian, you get on stage, so I just fell into this job because I needed a job. So this agency, if I didn't say it, this tiny little agency started off was called the Transportation Security Administration. Shocking, unbeknownst to me, I couldn't believe it. They called me back, and I answered, and we were kind of rushed in as cattle. I became a supervisor there. I started out as a supervisor, and I befriended a woman who also, it went, basically the call is, it went screener, lead, supervisor, right? So I couldn't believe I got the job as a supervisor. I mean, I was floored, and I was telling, my parents were very proud of me. And I couldn't believe it. And especially what they were offering at the time. It was seriously coming from the job that I had, the volunteer work, and even the job at the security firm. I had never seen even that much money, and so I pretty much said, can I, think about this? And then and that's when I said, well, you know what, maybe. And they're just like, well, they're hemming and hawing, these guys that interviewed me the 3rd time. And I said, okay, maybe I'll just do it. So I didn't want to, again, I had never seen that much money. So we signed on. I signed on. I took their offer, and I went into, it was like cattle. I mean, we're rushed in. We were studying. We were doing this training. They were training us, basically to be good screeners. And we were meeting this supposed guy, one of the pilots that were in the air that day. He was my trainer. And we had no reason to think this was all a lie. I had no reason to think that this guy in a white shirt and chino pants, khakis, is saying that, okay, he was lying to us about that he was the pilot in the sky that day that notified one of the first plane, notifying AOA that a plane just hit the World Trade Center. We took him, I took him at his word, and so he was one of the trainers that day. So this was July of 2002. And so it was pretty intense. The training was pretty intense. We had x-ray training. But we were told, something stood out to me that day. We were told to not give each other eye contact. So I thought that was really strange. And they also, they call them superiors, right? We were to call them superiors. And so they were just brainwashing us. They were brainwashing us early, and there was people that were younger than me there. They were in their 20s. And I'm, I really felt, I'm really glad when I look back on it. I'm so glad that I was in my, 30s when I got that job, because, I would have been more I don't know, intimidated, let's just say. But so they told us not to look, especially with the superiors. They didn't want us to stare at them or give them eye contact. And also they frowned upon us smiling or having fun or laughing. I tend to be, not many people see it now that I'm put in this program, this slow kill program, and I'm just basically marked for death. It's hard to be, you keep your sense of humor in this horrifying situation. But yeah, I mean, that was my training. It was, again, I was at a hotel, in the hotel lobby, and they would give us food, and and then shuffle us off to this room, shuffle us off to this another room, and we would do practice screening and on each other and with the wand, and then we would break for food, right? And then something strange happened, it was a week passed, and this is my best recollection, it was well over, I mean, this was 2002, 23 years ago. But we were given, after the week, we had to go through like testing and see how sharp we were on the x-ray. And I mean, whether you cut it or you didn't, you either made the cut or you didn't. And that's how it was, and it was pretty brutal. I saw people go home that were there all week with me that I made friends with, and they would just, they would fail on x-ray or something and they would be gone, but I passed on, these at the x-ray and screening. And so what they did was then we went into the physical part, right? So they ushered us into this room where, they would have a nurse and a doctor, and they would check out our eyes, check out our ears, we basically would have our hearing. It was basically sort of like a physical, back in the day when I did it in 2002. And that was strange and uncomfortable, but we were a lot of us were just pretty much desperate for a job. We just wanted to make an income. We were all pretty young, and so I passed the physical, and so did a friend of mine, and she was a lead at the time, so I was technically her boss, right? And but she was a banker. She didn't like that lifestyle. She thought it was too much. She wasn't a morally bankrupt person. Not to say that all bankers are, but she wasn't, and I really looked up to her. And I'll talk about her a little bit later because it means a lot for me to talk about her. Hopefully I don't get upset when I talk about her. And so, yeah, so we, that was that, she was my friend. I thank God we had each other in that horrific job. We were seen as like the rogue supervisors, but when she became a supervisor, and it's funny, I'll tell you this, amongst the officers, we were considered the rogue officer. We were considered rogue supervisors because we would go up against management because we were constantly fixing their problems. Like it seemed like they were purposely sabotaging the officers. And since I knew the SOP, Standard Operational Procedures, by heart, I would study that book, right? Because this job meant everything to me because I didn't want to lose it. So being a female supervisor, I knew that I was going to get called out because most of the officers that I supervised were men, and I'm glad that I did study the SOP. So, a lot of it was SSI, right? Most of the SOP was SSI, Secret Security Information. And it was on a basis of need to know. And so I would study it and I learned it by heart, and it was learning as you go, and I learned it by heart. So I had a lot of officers that were coming to me with sabotaged paperwork and everything, and then I would fix it for them. And just fixing things for them, I didn't realize that fixing these mistakes that were purposely done by certain people in the management would get me a big, huge target on my back, but it did. So I'll just take a breather, and you guys can.
Okay, so basically what I'm understanding, you go in, you work for the TSA post 9/11. It's a very different world than what you would generally expect in a regular 9 to 5. The whole brainwashing thing, like a lot of what you described, going from room to room, the physicals, it sounds like going through MEPS. And if you haven't been into the military, MEPS is the initial pre-screening and pre-training before you're sworn in and flown off for basic training. What is being described here is very reminiscent of MEPS. And it's definitely vintage brainwashing. No eye contact, no having fun. I mean, generally people are encouraged to have fun and, make their workplace a positive environment. It makes the day go by easier. It boosts morale in the workplace. I mean, you generally want your employees to have some semblance of happiness and routine, find a little nugget in the work machine, you know, that just kind of brings them joy and makes the job go smoother. And the fact that this was all shunned upon makes for a
removing
very
humanity.
interesting case. Say again?
It's removing humanity. So
It
in
is.
essence, like, so what's the first thing you do when you see a girl that you like? First, you look at her and you hope to hell that she doesn't look back. But then you look again and you're hoping that she does, because you want the eye contact for the wink. You want something to tell that person that I see you. And like, I'd love to have a conversation, but as of here, I see you. Now that's the love spectrum, right? I always lead with the fun and fluffy stuff. But now I'm mad
Nothing
at you.
wrong with that. And it actually really correlates into daily life. You know, it's the visual cues and communications that we enact with each other as human beings. It's not just word of mouth. It's
And then
hand
flip it.
gestures.
If I'm mad at you, I'm doing something else. You got and you can find this on YouTube all over the place, like Stone Cold Killer Faces. They'll stare down judges, right? Trying to really assert that, right? And that's a biological, it's a very masculine feature, but like, dude, like chicks can do it too. Make no mistake about it. But it's when we just look at each other and be like, okay, I'm going to sit down because this guy's going to hurt me, and we can just do it with our eyes. That's just how that works. Well, it sounds like they're removing that communicative power. So when your manager and or your superior steps out of line and you look up and you make eye contact and you're like, bro, I'm going to reach across this table and slap you if you give me another stupid idea, regardless as to whether or not you're above me in superiority and ranks. There is a lot of information that's conveyed inside of a look. So to discourage the look altogether is to beat the dog down and keep his head down and make sure that he eats when he's fed, and like, you just don't look at me. I don't care what your opinion is. Don't look at me. If it's a happy opinion, don't share it with your colleagues. If it's an angry opinion, I don't even want it. Don't look at me with that tone, as it would go.
Well, you know, early on it was. I later look back on it, and again, I was really young. This was, you know, I was a pretty innocent individual, you know, and I was pretty sheltered, and it was. I think someone's mic's on. I just don't. Sorry, guys. I get easily unfocused. I don't mean to be a Karen here. So, you know, I look back on it, and it really was to dehumanize us. You know,
You're
it was
okay,
early on, it was to dehumanize us. So I had that early on, you know, and that they started from day one, starting to dehumanize us so that we would think that we were nothing and we were pieces of shit, especially female supervisors. And they were especially hard on female supervisors, and especially female supervisors that knew the SOP by heart, the standard operational procedures by heart. Because, you know, I remember one of my officers said to me after I got there, I was only there for about even, I'd say, a year at this point, and he said, you know, you're a threat. You know, management sees you as a threat. And I said, well, wait a second, you know, and this is a guy that, you know, this isn't somebody that's a fan club member, or I didn't really have much of a, you know, I had a good rapport with the officers, but, you know, I wasn't trying to, you know, develop a fan club. I was just trying to be a person that, you know, I was trying to be the boss I've always wanted. That's what I kept in mind. You know, I wanted, that's it. And it's that simple. I wanted to be fair. I wanted to know the SOP by heart. I wasn't going to do anything that was morally bankrupt. I wasn't going to do anything that they were not going to, I refused to have anyone take my soul, you know? So, if you knew my parents, you know, you'd know why. I mean, my parents were, you know, I had amazing parents, you know, and, so I was just somebody that knew that standard operational procedures by heart. And I often had to push back with the management. You know, again, I wasn't afraid of management, you know, not at that time, not on the early years. I wasn't afraid of them. But, you know, things became more.
Connor's asking you to put it on pause for 1 second. Connor, go ahead. What's your thought?
It's more of a question and a thought, just so that I can straighten the shit out in my brain. Am I correct to assume that you had the position pre 9/11, and then you had a medical cancerous issues take place, and then you returned to work post 9/11? Do I have the timeline right?
No, I appreciate it. Push back really anytime. I appreciate that. You know, I learned early on in that job, trust but verify, right? So there's nothing wrong with that, getting clarification. That's a huge, and I thank you for that. You know, being in that, I worked for a security firm. So before I started, so I did a lot of volunteer work, and then, you know, I had a volunteer position with the government. And then I worked at a shelter for women, and then I got a position. And again, I'm nervous, guys, so bear with me here. I got a position at a security firm, you know, and I was, so I had to, you know, I had that job, but that was the job and that was before 9/11. You know, and that's a job I even met Donald Trump in. You know, I met a lot of famous people in that job because, you know, a lot of lawyers worked in that building as well. I did too. And so, you know, part of my position was helping to guard the building, right? That was my job position, you know, and supervise there. And so, you know, that was before 9/11. That was the job where I was doing college full time and I was doing work full time at that job, that security firm. So it was becoming, and then I had with my, you know, some of my guards would bang out, and then I would end up having to do double shifts that were just burning me out and not getting paid for the double shift, you know? So I had to, that's when I asked my boss, you know, what do you think I should do? Do you have any advice for me? And he said, never demote yourself. So when that job was coming up, I found it on Yahoo. I think I found it on like Hotmail jobs or something. This is when I had a Hotmail account, email. And it was, they said, you know, is applying for, they were looking for, right? Because they were looking to federalize the government was looking to federalize the airports by, they were looking for United States citizens, and they were looking to federalize the airport within 1 year. So it was from basically from 2001, right after 9/11, after it happened, to 2002. And that's when they got all the laws passed and everything to do that and move forward and federalize all the airports. And that's when I saw the ad that said they were looking for a screener. They were looking for screeners, leads, and supervisors. So a screener is obvious, right? A screener is a screener, right? They screen at the airport. And then a lead is their boss. And then a supervisor would be the lead's boss. And I had applied for only one position as a supervisor because I was listening to my boss, right? Back at my old job, I was listening to his advice when he said, never demote yourself. So I didn't demote myself, and I applied for only one position, and I got it.
Okay, so
Perfect.
you went to work for TSA after 9/11, established yourself as kind of an alpha there, despite being suppressed, for lack of a better term, by a bunch of betas in superior positions. And over the course of time, betas seeing you as an alpha, see you as a threat, you know, the whole I can never date a woman whose balls are bigger than mine mentality. And basically would I be correct in assuming that that's where things started to take a turn for the negative?
Well, I should say this, right? I have nothing against transgendered people, but I don't have I'm a natural born female, and and I am a natural born female, and that's it. I would never ever transition or anything, but I have nothing against people that have transitioned. So hypothetically speaking, right? Thing. I know you're doing hypothetically speaking, but unfortunately in the TI community, there's people that are there's some, you know, man-childs that will pick up on that and run with it and mock me. You know, so I mean, that's, you know, we also I have to deal with, you know, I've never been called alpha, but, you know, here's what I've learned. All right. I learned this early on, you know, again, and if you met my mother, you'd understand why I am the way I am. I come from a family with very strong women. I mean, very badass, strong women, you know, and I was never, ever in that family that, you know, my mother never said, now hide who you are. Nobody has to know you're this strong. You know, it just wasn't, you know, my mother taught me early on, you know, that, you know, she taught me, you know, 7 years old. She used to say, you got to have a job. You got to get going. You can't rely on a man. You have to have your own job, you know? So I learned early on. I'm like, okay, yep. You know, so by the time I was 11, I got a paper route. And that's when my first job started at 11 years old, you know? So hold on one second.
No problem. Basically, what you're saying is, you kind of had that ingrained in you, the new age woman mentality ingrained in you from an early age. Be the strong, independent woman. Don't depend on a man.
Yes,
A
absolutely.
lot of the early feminist ideals of the strong, independent woman. And nothing wrong with making sure that you can provide for and take care of yourself, but
Yeah, and I
suffice it
didn't
to
realize
say,
that it was, I didn't realize again that, when I got into that job, I didn't know there was such a stigma surrounded by women that were, just kind of like, remained on the right side of history and didn't expect for, I never expected for in my life for a man to take care of me. So, I
yeah.
always, so anyway, so I'll go
Was
ahead.
that job primarily male dominated? Was that
Absolutely.
field?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And they
Well, it's
also
a
let
dick
me know. I'm
grabbing
sorry,
job.
go
Of
ahead. Go ahead,
course,
go ahead.
it's mostly male dominated. It's a bunch of gay
I'm
dick.
sorry, could you repeat that, John? I didn't catch it.
Without any like honest to goodness insult towards yourself for doing the job, but like it's a dick grabbing job. Of course, it's male dominated. They're just looking for new ways to touch each other's peckers without being called gay.
Well, I mean, okay. Well, there you go. There you go. Powerful statement and not too far off. So and also, this job too, there
Oh,
was a lot of guys.
shame.
I didn't understand that a lot of these guys, I didn't understand that some of them, were, even though here it is, I'm helping them out, right? I'm, trying to change their schedule for them or get their, medical paperwork in and tell them how they can get it passed, and don't use paperwork that's documentation that's expired. And, because there's so many pushback, I would have to, it's just weird. Unfortunately, it was a very sexist, misogynistic atmosphere, and, but I was so used to it, so it wasn't strange. I mean, I would see, I ended up sticking up for a lot of my female officers because, it was really, unfortunately, it was on the predatory side when it came to the female TSA officers, and especially, with the TSA management. Some of these guys, right? Because they were in these powerful, these powerful positions at the time. And, they had their sights on the pretty female TSA screener, that she's just wants to, she's 21 and she's excited. This is this first job. And, so it wasn't, I started to become really, kind of protective of the TSA, especially the TSA females, because, the way that, they were getting hit on from, not only from the passengers, but also from management. And then they would be hit on from, there'd be some guys that were already married that were TSA screeners that would be like, hey, you want to I'm just to let you know, I'm interested in you, I'll just be over here. But, oh yeah, I got that baby at home, but we got trouble. We got trouble at home, me and her, so it's, I would just be like, so I just became protective of them. And, one of them, I remember one of my officers, she got pregnant by a TSA manager, and I was just like, oh boy, and it was swept under the rug. And then she just disappeared one day. She was on my checkpoint and then she was gone. My inquiring about her was like, is she alive, guys? Is she okay? I mean, I tend to have, she was okay, by the way. She was just, pulled from the site so that, the gossip mill didn't start, and the TSA manager wouldn't be, get any grief from it. You know how that goes. He wouldn't get any grief from it because he already had a wife at home and a newborn baby, so, but that would happen. That would be happening a lot. I noticed when it started to kind of make me uncomfortable when I started to realize it, that it was happening more and more, and it was so prevalent. So then I kind of started to be like this squeaky wheel, where, I just noticed that paperwork was being screwed up on, sabotaged. I started to see that, wait a second, why is this paperwork being sabotaged coming from management? And then knowing the SOP by heart, I would have to fix it. So given one example was he wasn't even one of my officers, right? He was an individual, his name was Charlie. And I really, I was really protective of Charlie, even though he had a club foot. And so I became really protective of him, and he was walking one day towards my checkpoint, and I said to him, And he looked so sad. And my first reaction was to make him laugh. You know, I was that kind of supervisor. I was not a bitch or anything. I was definitely a pushover, and that didn't help my situation at all. But so when he was walking towards my checkpoint, I said, he looked so sad, and I said, "Hey, what's up, Mr. Charles?" And you know, he says, and he was practically crying, you know. And I said, "Hey, what's up? Come here, what's up?" And he's gonna cry. And I took him into my office and I said, "Do you want to, what's going on?" And he showed me the paperwork. I gave him a hug and he showed me the paperwork. And I said, "Okay, well, this is doable." And he said, they denied, the HR Human Resources denied my kidney dialysis." And I said, "Charlie, they can't deny it. They can't deny your kidney dialysis. So it's okay." And I had no fear at all back then. Kind of like I don't have a lot of fear now, because I already know I'm a walking dead woman. So I said to him, I called up my first boss, this is a guy that he was one of my first bosses, but since he was a jackal and pretty much the second coming of Satan, he got a job as one of the head guys in the HR. And I called him because this is a guy that could have made me a blood stain on a carpet. But I called him and I said, "Hey, what's going on?" And he says, "Oh, and he was such an awful, bitter curmudgeon of a person. Here he is making 6-figure salaries, but he was, just hated people. He was into Schadenfreude. And Schadenfreude is the German word for enjoying other people's misery, enjoying the misery of others. It's the term Nazis used a lot. And so I said, "Hey," and I didn't have any fear with him. I said, "Why would you give Charlie documentation that's expired? That's setting him up. You were setting him up to fail." And he said, "Oh," and he was real quiet, and he started to laugh a little. And he said, "You caught that, huh?" And I said, "Yeah, I caught it." And he said, "Oh, you're not even a supervisor." "Yeah, but I said, "Yeah, it doesn't matter though. I caught it. Doesn't matter I'm a supervisor. I am a supervisor. So it doesn't matter that I'm not Charlie's supervisor. I am a supervisor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change out the paperwork. I'm going to give him paperwork that's not expired. And then I'm going to have an officer run it over to you. And you'll have it close of business day." Charlie, I had that fixed for Charlie. And that became like this pattern. That became like this constant pattern where, I was fixing a lot of paperwork that was being purposely sabotaged on the officers. And he actually ended up also being able to go to kidney dialysis, and I felt pretty good about that.
I have an idea.
Sure.
The wheel's turning.
Well, it's just I haven't done something like this in a few years, and I stopped doing it because it never held a lot of traction. But one of the biggest reasons that it didn't hold traction was because there wasn't a cause of value attached to it. Now, the more I'm listening to this person, the more I'm hearing a cause of value and things that I just don't like. So in order to try to change things that I don't like, they always say, somebody really should do something about that. And my argument has always been, well, I'm somebody, so let's fucking do something about that. So I haven't actually given a national, international order from the Worldwide Resistance Network's beacon in over 12 years, I think. And what I'm thinking that what we should do now is make sure that it's lined in right. I think Revan can help with this one. Honestly, the resistance member that lives closest to this individual will be the one that will be able to help the most. But what I'm looking to accomplish here is to have the Worldwide Resistance Network spearhead some sort of GoFundMe. Now, in order to safeguard the GoFundMe and the money and the da-da-da-da-da-da, because it's always way too fucking skeptical, we're going to have to make sure that Revan handles this side of it. Now, people are going to ask me first and foremost, what would I do with the money? And I'm going to tell you what I would do with the money, and all you guys have to do is either agree or disagree and take the money and run. It doesn't matter to me. I think that, and I believe deep down inside of my heart that this individual has what would be called the grace, the great grace of God kind of stuff, the the willingness and desire to help another individual, which is extremely flipping hard to find in today's day. Normally, these people run shelters, right? But now, what's the cause of the shelter? What would the shelter do? Who would it protect? Why would it have it protect? Right? Insert 10 million questions. We'll hash out the details. But targeted individuals. Now, see, in my world, when we think of targeted individuals, it's normally split down the middle here to some degree. Now, when you hear shelters, you normally go to like abused women's shelters and things of that nature. That's where the mind travels to. And she may have been lucky in her life from time to time to come across one of these shelters to help her for a day or two. And I'm only making stuff up because I don't know the truth at this point, and could have been easily turned away because she didn't fit the criteria, so to speak. So funding a shelter, a national shelter inside of the United States to help people that have held, from what I understood in the storytelling so far, positions of substantial power, because what you guys have brought to me is a disgruntled TSA agent post 9/11, which means it's an individual that had to, in some way, shape, or form, enforce what one would call the Patriot Act, because it's involving airports and X-ray screenings and well, we know all the details. We're not going to get into conspiracies. We know what's what. So, but this is the job that this person entails. So when this person says that they're targeted, the only thing I can tell you, Noble, is that they're not targeting you because they're afraid of what you're going to do to them. Because what you're going to do to them, that part's already done. They're targeting you because you're one of the very few people that will believe the future people that come to you with these kinds of problems. Now you just need to have a place to put these people. So I really think that Operation Human Angel should be reignited. This could spearhead that cause. And if any finances develop from that, it should, I believe that this woman is intelligent enough to manage those finances and open a shelter for her, for anybody that's similar to her, for anybody that she deems.
You're going more the sanctuary recovery programming.
Yes. Now down here where I'm from, we have this thing called the Humanity Project. Okay, this guy here started by serving homeless people hot dogs. Okay, that's how we started. Did it in the rain, did it in the sun, did everything, and all of a sudden, because as she's mentioned, and more than once, she stated that it's not always bad people. There are good people in the world, and I'm going to echo that.
Shelter. I never stayed at a shelter. I worked at a shelter. I worked at the shelter. I worked there. Yeah, I never actually stayed at a shelter. I've been blessed enough to be able to, save some funds, and I was able to buy a house. So I'm lucky. I'm blessed there for sure.
Yeah, what Connor is suggesting is, and I'm sorry to cut you off, Connor, but allow me to paraphrase for our guest. What Connor is suggesting is, given your experience having worked in a shelter, and given your demeanor that you are one of those people that people not only gravitate to in terms of looking for help, but are in fact somebody that they can depend on to get things fixed, to get the help that they need. You are essentially being targeted because you are the person that could unfuck the fuckery. And Connor is suggesting,
yes, absolutely,
a program of sorts that would perhaps enable you to better do that job. But before I would say that that's a good idea or a bad idea, I want to continue on with this story and get a full scope of, we know thus far up to this point, you've worked at TSA, you've got kind of a bullseye on your back. I want to know where this story goes. From this point on, you've got the bullseye on your back. You're pretty much the alpha mama bear protecting her cubs in the TSA, and the upper management, who have baby dicks, don't like it. So where does it go from here? Moving the story forward.
It just from there, so I got the paperwork in. He was able to go to kidney dialysis, and I didn't, I was glad. I was glad that he was able to go to kidney dialysis. But I think someone's mic is.
Revan, mute your mic.
Yeah, so I mean, it started to just, I started to feel attention with management because I was really proud that I knew that standard operational procedures by heart. I was going to be a social worker, so it really gave me, it was like chicken soup for the soul when I could actually help my officers, and especially officers that were going to supervisors that weren't helping them. I didn't even understand that, so since I knew that by heart, I knew that I found it, I felt like it was just my obligation to help them. Even, and again, I had some, I did have some misogynistic officers that, just, I don't know, hated me for the way I looked, so, I kind of, and this was the day of, patriots, right? They were all a lot of patriots there, and they were all a lot of, remember, we were at war at that time. This was in the early 2000s, we were at war. The Iraq war, Afghanistan war, we were chasing after Osama bin Laden, the wrong guy. And it's just, all of this confusion was happening and all the fog of war was happening, purposely done. And I actually, let me digress for a second. I actually remember I was hanging on the words, because I was pretty much an advocate. I was an advocate. I think that's where I became like some kind of triple threat that I didn't even know I was. Because I loved, I was passionate about helping people. I was passionate about helping disenfranchised people. I never should have been in that job for sure. I took a wrong turn in life. One of my jobs that I wish I would have loved to have is a director in a nursing home so that no abuse could happen to the elderly, because that's another place I volunteered. I was a gerontology major, and so, that's where I was going to go. I was going into these fields, right? Where I could have helped people. I wanted to help people, social worker or director of a nursing home. Because again, when I was young, I had all my friends. I got bullied a lot. I was very badly bullied when I was in my single digits, and my friends. I met a lot. I met these elderly people that kind of took me in. Remember my paper route job. Starting at 11. So I met a lot of people in their 80s and 90s that took me in, and I learned a lot from them. And that's why I wanted to, my fantasy job was being the director of a nursing home so that no one could be abused. No elderly person would be abused on my watch, and then I took this radically wrong turn in life because I just needed a job. This agency was just starting out. So, I'm going to push back gently, John, when you said, and I want to circle around, when you said, you probably had to do a lot of stuff like the Patriot Act and all that stuff. I can tell you that when I didn't feel comfortable doing anything that I found morally bankrupt, I wouldn't do it. There was one thing that a lot of the management pushed for the officers is that, because there was just this, we didn't have a union there. So, they treated us very poorly, and again, many of us had the Stockholm syndrome. We were in fear of management, and years passed and I was included. I was in fear of management. They kind of started to put the fear of God in me because, my life started to weird things, right? These coincidences, these unfortunate incidences started happening in my life, and I couldn't figure it out. I was kind of like in this weird free fall. The more I became an ally, because I loved being an ally, especially, the officers were so many of them were disenfranchised. I could have easily with my resume, not bragging, but easily with my resume, I could have made six-figure salaries. I could have made I could have been a TSA manager, but I didn't want to, sell my soul, just for money. I didn't want to sell my soul for anything. That's why I remained a supervisor. And so I could help them on the floor. And it felt like, it started to feel like I was in a war, just a war, just kind of like, pushing back on management, just like, hey, wait a second, that's unfair. That's kind of that. Why would we do that? That's unfair. And when I started saying, hey, wait, back off, that's unfair. Don't do that to him. That's unfair. And I found myself doing that with officers. Some officers, not everybody's going to love you. Not everybody's even going to like you. I remember this one officer, he was pretty young. He was 18. And, he just, I don't know. He was very, he didn't, he didn't have a lot of respect for women, that's for sure. You know, so I would see the way he treated women, other female officers, and I kind of cringed, and I, you know, had to take him aside and say, hey, you know what you could do? You could be a little respectful. You don't have to, you know, no, you can't, you're not, no, please do not be touching, you know, please do not touch people that don't want to be touched, okay? And then from that moment on, I became, you know, public enemy #1 with this guy, but I still had to help him. You know, he wanted, you know, he was unhappy because he didn't have a certain, you know, he didn't have a family in that state. And I still had to just swallow my pride. And even though this guy didn't like me, I still had to help him because it was my job. That was my job. My job wasn't to be like, okay, well, since you don't like me, I'm not going to help you. You know, I didn't have that mentality at all. You know, I loved that I could help. I was very proud that I knew that SOP by heart. But again, I want to, you know, I didn't enforce this Patriot Act stuff. I really hated the Patriot Act. I knew it was going to be an issue, you know, and, you know, I still, again, I did a lot of stuff that I'm very proud of. You know, and if I was a person that was going to always refused. If something didn't feel right in my gut, I wasn't going to do it. I was very much like my mother, you know, and that's why, you know, when I did come back from cancer treatment, you know, I did a lot of research about the machines. And so I did go up the chain of command. And because that's what, you know, it's called we had a whistleblower protection there. It was called the No Fear Act. And the No Fear Act was established by George W. Bush, and it was just a bunch of bullshit. I didn't know it was a bunch of bullshit at the time. I didn't know it was like toilet paper, as useless as, well, I guess toilet paper is more useful than the No Fear Act, because you can wipe yourself with it. But the No Fear Act was completely useless, and I didn't know this. And, you know, I just thought it was, okay, well, I'm just going to tell them that maybe, you know, maybe there's some kind of calibration, you know, the calibrations are not working properly or something, and they need to get on top of that. And, you know, and here I am, right? I'm at you know, the officers, some of the officers would joke and call this building that I had to speak truth to power in. They would joke around and they would call this building where management was in, they would call it jokingly, they would call it Nazi headquarters. And so, you know, I never really got that. I knew that where they were coming from with that, because we had a very, very strict management. And again, I mean, you know, they really made sure that, you know, they really didn't like anybody not being afraid of them. Does that make sense? Right. So I went up the chain of command. I let them know. I said, hey, you know, I barely had any hair because I had to go through chemotherapy, and I also had to lose my breast, unfortunately, to cancer. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to bring it up to them. And I brought it up to them, and there was just this very uncomfortable silence, right? You know, and here I am, quote unquote, looking at my quote unquote, right, supposedly superiors, but unfortunately, anything but. I mean, and I said to them, there's something up with, I don't know if it's the calibrations of the machines, or I just want to put it out there that I don't know. I said, I certainly don't want to blame anybody here that I got cancer from the machines, but, you know, so I just want to put it out there. And they just stared at me. It was, I'll never forget, there was one woman, a co-supervisor, who was supposedly in the room for moral support. I later learned that she was, you know, not anything but moral support. She was, you know, she was part of the problem. And my management, they were just pretty much like, well, what do you want us to do? You know, kind of like, what do you want us to do? And, well, you know, it was really uncomfortable. You could hear crickets in the room. And then my co-supervisor said, well, you know, if you don't feel, I said, you know, I don't know. I want to make sure those machines are safe. And that's all. You know, I'm just bringing that up. And, you know, and my co-supervisor looks at me and she goes, you know, if you don't feel comfortable, you don't have to be on those machines. You know, you can just get your officers to be on the machines. And I remember looking at the head honcho, not her, and I looked at him, and this is a person that we didn't have any love for each other, that's for sure. But again, remember, I had lots of spit and vinegar in me, so I looked at him and I said, without hesitation, I said to him, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to put any of my officers on those machines, because I'm not going to ask them to do anything that I'm not prepared to do myself. And I just remember there was just a silence, you know, just this awkward silence. And I ended up kind of like literally just kind of like pulling out my chair and hearing a shriek, a squeak from it, and walking out of there feeling like I think I may be in trouble. You know, silently thinking to myself, I don't know what just happened there, but that just didn't go down like I thought it was going to go down. And I walked out of there, and my co-supervisor said, you know, you did the right thing. And I said, I do think, I said, I know I did the right thing. And she said, yeah, you know, and she was real quiet. And I said, man, you know what? I'm just feeling like I need to get lawyers now. I really do feel like I don't feel safe. And she said, yeah, I don't blame you. And I said, what?
Before moving forward, you wound up with cancer. You went through chemo, all of that. You say that you speculate that it was because of the machines you were working with. Are there any other people that you worked with in particular that wound up with the same or similar conditions?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there was. You know, when I came back, I started, you know, looking into how many individuals were going through what I had gone through. And I had kind of leaned on my buddy, the woman I talked to you guys about, that we went to training together in July of 2002 when we made fast friends. She didn't mind she didn't mind that I had a sense of humor. And I said to her, you know, what do you think we should do? And she said, well, you know, I said, I have no clue what to do. I don't even know what that silence meant. I don't know how. I said, I don't think it was very well received. And she said, okay, well, she said, let's just take an in-house survey. You know, we'll just gather some numbers. And I said, oh, okay. I didn't, you know, I really did. This woman, to me, you know, even though she was a lead and I was a supervisor, she later became a supervisor. I really looked up to her. So I said, okay, I'm going to follow your lead in this. And that's exactly what she did. So she took in-house numbers, and she found, you know, she found a good amount. And we brought it up. Me and her got some individuals involved that were, you know, the part of management. And we said that how we addressed how uncomfortable we were, that, you know, we were seeing a lot of autoimmune diseases, and we were seeing a lot of individuals, a lot of officers with, you know, not, I mean, you know, a good share. I don't want to say a lot, but, you know, a good share, a share that was just like, wait a second, you know, something, let's look into this. And let's bring this up again to the chain of command. And we did that. And then after we did that, we thought it was probably best that we contact OSHA. And then after we contact OSHA, we thought it would be best to contact management again. And then we contacted some politicians, and everything fell up, you know, just everything fell on deaf ears.
Okay, so I think I'm starting to get the picture here. We're pretty much at the point where you're pretty well probably done with the TSA. And would I be correct in that assumption?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, even
okay.
You know, I became targeted at work. I became very heavily targeted at work, and they were just trying to write me up for things. I mean, you know, certain things where I wasn't even there. You know, and I'd be like, wait a second, I wasn't even in that day. You know, it was getting so obvious. And so I was telling my parents, and I was saying, this is getting pretty scary, and I don't know what to do here, you know. And my parents were just like these people that were like, just don't back. Hey, you can't back down. Well, you can't back down now. You know, you have lawyers, and your lawyers will take care of it, and we'll see where it goes from there. And I said, okay. And that's what I did. I mean, I pretty much gave it to my attorneys. And then there was just another situation where it was this very, you know, a very obvious unjustified write-up. And I, you know, took it to my boss. You know, a lot of my bosses at this point, you know, had become, they were my officers, right? So they were now my bosses. And because they were, wanted to be a part of management, and I never did. So, many of my officers became my, my boss. So when I got this certain kind of write-up, it was just so blatantly a setup. And I said, wait, no, I'm going to have to call my attorney on this. And then I called her. She was quite the badass. I called her and I said, look, this is what they're doing. There's just no way. This is complete setup. I had to call outside of any kind of surveillance, which is not easy to do at the airport, because they always had, we were definitely the rats for that. We were the mice for that. We were the experimental mice. They would probably say, the management would probably say rats, right? Because they didn't have much respect to, for us, the people that I don't know, I guess we're seen as the rogue supervisors. And again, there wasn't many rogue supervisors there. I always got called that, when I had a co-supervisor that I admired very much. He was called a rogue supervisor too. And it was only because we cared about the officers. We cared about their well-being. We cared about their health. And, so it was suddenly we found ourselves as being called rogue and problems, so when they showed me that write-up, I pushed back and I said, this is impossible. This is so, and it was a person gave it to me he used to be one of my officers, and I was kind of shaming him. Because I had a good rapport with many of my officers. And I said, this is bullshit, Dan. This is bullshit, Daniel. It is. And he's just like, I can't, barely looking at me. And he's saying to me, I don't want to get into it. Could you just please, I don't want to get into it. I said, well, you're okay. Well, you're in on it. You're in it, right? Because you're trying to do this, and I said, you know what? And I said to him, I remember saying this to him. I said, you were so much happier when you were a screener. You were so much happier than you are in that 3-piece suit. And I said to him, and then I said, well, I'm going to have to step out somewhere where there's no surveillance. I said, so pray for me, Dan, because that's going to be like maybe a 7-mile walk to find a place where I can actually talk and have no surveillance. And I found a place, and I called my lawyer. I told her the situation, and she said, leave. She said, just leave ASAP, leave. And when I heard her, she was very concerned for me, very, very concerned for me. And she said, and I left immediately. And so it was, I kept getting targeted over and over and over again. And I had to, I remained with my attorneys to the very end, and it was all I can say about that time, it was a very scary time for me and for a lot of people. But, I was in it, and it was very scary. I didn't want to be in that position at all. I didn't ask to be in that position at all. My whole thing was I didn't want to be, I just didn't want to hurt anybody. That was it. I was going to stand my ground because I wanted to make sure, I didn't want to hurt anybody. And I didn't care that I was the supervisor. I just didn't want to hurt anybody.
Okay, so you ruffled a lot of feathers while you were at the TSA. And instead of them just firing you and calling it a day, you wound up quitting. And now it's just an endless act of vengeful retribution at this point?
Yeah, basically. Absolutely. It was, yeah.
Okay, so from the time that you left the TSA, when you got that notification from your lawyer to just say, fuck it, leave, get the fuck out of there right now, where did things go from there? You said that you're pretty much a dead woman at that point. Can you elaborate, give us a timetable for starters. What year did you wind up leaving the TSA? And what happened from that point on to present day that, pretty much led you to believe that you're a dead woman walking?
Yeah. I left there, and that was, I took federal disability, and that was well over 10 years ago. And it was strongly suggested because I had so many injuries anyway. My attorney suggested that I take it. And and it was also, I was also taking care of my mother. I love that. I mean, trust me, it was the best job I ever had was to take care of my mom. But my mother, you know, looking back and doing the math, being a targeted person now, and then doing the math at with what happened to my parents. I think my parents died pretty mysteriously when I look back on it. But I thought it was pretty, par for the course of just my parents being up there in age. But just mysterious stuff started happening like that, and I didn't know that, and again, it was just, I wasn't going to, I don't know. I mean, I felt again, because remember, I did have Stockholm syndrome. So I was very much at that point I was pretty much afraid of my management. They had I started to become afraid of them. And then my friend that I just came in with, my good friend, she was in her 50s. She had gone through breast cancer as well. And we had been through the same type of cancer, and the tumor was the same size, same breast, same grade. We thought that was super suspicious. And but she ended up dying in her sleep in her 50s. They found her son found her dead in her bed. And that's when I was still working there.
My sincerest condolences.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. She was an amazing person. She was an incredible person. I just hate the fact that, it's almost like, I don't feel like, it's just very sad when I think about her because she was such a badass. She was such an amazing person. She kept her moral compass to the very end, but when I look back on it now, that she had been through cancer, she was out of the woods. And then, and then hearing about how her son found her dead, it's just, to me, it was crushing. It was crushing. And I went to her funeral, and it was, she had an open casket. And when I went there, I had these management that were at the door, certain people in the management, and they had their hand out for me to shake. And that happened with about 6 managers, and I didn't shake any of their hands. I started praying silently to myself just to get me to her coffin so I could kneel down and say some prayers for her. And it was very hard to see her, because, she was pale. It was surreal. I was in shock. She was the strongest person next to my mother that I've ever known. And I didn't know how I was going to do this without her. And I got back up from kneeling down, and I walked over to her only son. And I said, "Your mother was amazing. Your mother was one of my superheroes. She was incredible. And I was so honored to this day to know her. And now she's your angel. And she's going to watch over you." And I walked away. He looked down, and he looked so devastated. I just wanted to make him laugh or something. I wanted to take his pain away, and I walked out of there. Another co-supervisor grabbed my hand because it was just a very traumatizing thing, and she led me to the exit. And I was holding back tears. I got in my friend's vehicle, and my stomach was in knots. I remember turning down reclining the seat in the passenger seat, and I was holding on my stomach. Felt like I was going to get sick. And I was upset. I was crying. I held it in so that I didn't cry around my management. And, he was one of my officers that had become my friend. He used to say to me, you're a good person when I want to be friends with you. Because I would never want to I've never been friends with any of my supervisors. So he made sure that that I felt honored. We had a very good rapport. We
Yeah,
were very, we became good.
I can second that. I can relate to where you're coming from there. Okay, so how long after you left the TSA did this funeral take place?
So at the time, this was a funeral that was, I'm trying to think it, I think it was, let's see, it was I want to say that it was over, I'll just say it was 10 years ago. It was roughly about 10 years ago. Because I don't, I'm trying not to say her name or anything or any kind of, because it's the internet now. People try to weaponize everything. So some people, there's evil out there, unfortunately.
Yes, absolutely, and we definitely want to be showing a great deal of compassion for the dead and their families. Especially in situations that they really don't have anything to do with. They don't need to be roped into a situation that they probably don't even know anything about. So
Right.
I feel where you're coming from there.
Yeah.
Moving forward,
Mhm.
what are some of the gang stalking that you have experienced? I mean,
Well, let me tell you.
heard
Let me
in
tell you. Gang
behind the round
stalking
table
is.
there were some things
Yeah,
that
gang
you didn't
stalking is
want to talk
really.
about.
Yeah. Okay. Gang stalking is a really bad terminology, and I know you're not purposely using that. It's like a weapon, right? It's like a goofy. It doesn't. It's like a trigger word for the law enforcement to trigger them.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it's just a.
What would you classify it as?
I
What
mean,
would be a better
I would call
classification?
it community organized stalking. I'd call it community policing. These
Okay.
people that are stalking us are working off their prison sentences. Some of the people that are stalking us that have been hired by Infraguard and other nefarious agencies to stalk us and make our life a living hell until they try to make us unalive ourselves, which I would never do in a million years. I would never unalive myself. And I would also never hurt anybody. Never, ever in a million years would I hurt anybody unless they were coming at me wanting to hurt me and kill me or something, and I had to defend myself. But I would never do that. I'm
Self-defense.
very just to say. I mean, I'm not a violent person at all, and so that I can't say enough profusely that I would never harm myself. So I would never unalive myself,
So
and
code
that will never
5150
change.
is not a factor.
Sorry.
So just for the general audience to be aware, code 5051 or 5150 as it's commonly called is not a factor for you. You're not going to
No.
kill, you're not going to
No.
unalive yourself. You're
Nope.
not going to unalive anybody else or do any sort of
Never.
harm to anybody.
Never. Nope.
So let the record show that
Yeah.
this person will not harm herself or anybody else. Okay. Back behind the round
You want me
table,
to talk
you
about
made
the gang
mention.
stalking? That you were asking me who the groups. So a lot of these groups are
Yeah.
secret societies. When I first so I've been covertly stalked now for about 22, I want to say 22 years. I've been covertly stalked. I just recently did the math on that because I didn't realize I was being covertly stalked and that I was put into a bubble. And I had, some of my relationships ever since at that job, they were honeypots. And I'll discuss what a honeypot is. And so, it's basically a spy pretty much. So I mean, I've been overtly stalked now for 1 year since May 2024. And the reason why my covert stalking became overt is because, I had moved to this New England town and I really loved it here. I was looking for community. I also, I have certain injuries that I was looking to, that I have to take care of, that I have to, they're just constant pretty much. So I met this person that was, going to help me out with just injuries to my body. And, so I met them and they were in this professional field of helping, like a physical therapist. And I consulted with them and I said, hey, by the way, do you have community? Do you know anybody? I'm looking for community and I haven't been able to find it. It's been, I don't know. I've been at the churches and stuff and hanging out at the churches and going to some Sunday churches, but Sunday masses. And I said, and she, this person wrote down her number And in my phone, she put it in my phone. She said, you know what? The community is going to start with me. And she smiled. And I said, oh, okay, wow. You know, she wasn't hitting on me or anything. She was just like, hey, you know, yeah, why don't we hang out sometime and I'll introduce you to some of my friends and, you know, and I'll show you a great community. And there's like, you know, and I said, oh, wow, okay. And I was very green. And I didn't realize that, you know, basically it was a gang stalker. That was a perpetrator. That was a person that is an agent, is, you know, a chaos agent. And she was planted in my life. And she was planted in my life to, you know, make me, you know, create chaos in my life and try to basically destroy me and try to get me to, you know, while acting like a friend, right? She befriended me, but she wasn't, it was all bullshit. You know, it was all that, you know, she did it. And she was the whole plan, you know, that I discovered later, right? They say, you know, it's, it was to just destroy me and get me to unalive myself. So, you know, I would hang out. She would always say, hey, you know, come by here and let's see here. Hey, come by, stop by here, stop by my house, stop by that, you know, and so I'd do that. And, you know, and she would, you know, she introduced me to some of her friends. And I didn't know that, you know, I thought it was a little weird that they were all so into gossip. They were very much into gossip, and it made me uncomfortable, you know. So I started to kind of back off because it just seemed like there was always chaos around them. You know, every time I'd say, hey, everybody, and then chaos would start, you know, just gossip would start. Hey, what do you think of this one? What do you think of that one? And I didn't know that it was all a setup. And it was just a bunch of narcissists, these gang stalking narcissists that were placed purposely in my life to wreak havoc on my life and try to get me to unalive myself, you know, and, you know, basically get me into really bad situations where, you know, I would be left in, you know, harm's way, you know. But I started to discover, you know, I'd known them for, you know, about almost a year before it started. But it was a situation, how I found out was it was just nonstop gossip with them, nonstop drama. And it was all these women. And again, I didn't know it was a covet. It was a covet of witches, Luciferian witches. I mean, I can't even make this shit up because I didn't even know there was such a thing because I was so green. You know, they were all, you know, a lot of them were into paganism and a lot of them were into worshiping Lucifer. And I didn't know that. Like, I got the memo really late. So when I sat down with one of them, she was telling me that she was you know, I had been this, you know, we had been friendly for months, you know, and she said, you know, she just dropped the fact that she was a functioning meth user. And, you know, and then, cause, you know, at some point when we were talking, she took out her teeth and she was only 40 years old and she took out her teeth and she had no teeth. And I was kind of taken back by this, and I'm looking at her, and this was, you know, this was a woman that, an attractive woman. And I just was just in shock, you know, but it was all kind of a theater. And I know that people who are targeted will know what that means. It was just to get my reaction. It was like this theater, this stage. These people have handlers, these people, right? She, you know, probably had a prison sentence that she needed to work off with her husband. And she, you know, they target them, you know, they target morally bankrupt people. They also target the people that are in need, people that are vulnerable. They target the drug addicted population, and they turn them out into, you know, gang stalkers, into stalkers. And these people are willing to stalk innocent people to get their prison sentences or what have you, their charges reduced. And that's reality. And yeah, allegedly, we'll throw that in, allegedly. And so when she, and some do it just to stalk us, just to do it because they're in a secret society, they're in a brotherhood, they're a Freemason, an Eastern Star, they're, you know, they're into the occult, and this was one of their scenarios that they have to do. This is their, you know, what the brotherhood wants them to do, and is stalk us and try to get us to unalive ourselves. And, you know, so when I sat down with her, she took out her teeth. And I was shocked. And she said, she said, don't worry about it. She laughed and she said, I'm a functional meth user. And I said, oh, what? Huh?
Against such thing.
You know, yeah. And I'm a person, I don't drink. I don't, you know, I don't drink any alcohol. I don't do any drugs. I you know, so this was pretty shocking, and what she said was shocking. And then, you know, and kind of we started to have a conversation about our beliefs. And I don't know who brought it up, but I said, I'm a very big believer in God. I said, I'm a follower of Christ. And she gave me this look, like this smirk. It's like the, covert narcissists have this smirk that they give you, right? It's like a chilling smirk, like they know something about you.
I know exactly what you're talking
it's like
about.
this smirk, they lift, they kind of, they lift up their lip or something, and they give you the duper's delight smirk that narcs give you. And she gave me that smirk and looked at me and raised her lip like Elvis, right? She had that little curl. And I said, what? I'm a follower of Christ. And she goes, oh, and she talked like very quickly, right? She talked very fast, I'm talking fast because I get a lot of trauma with this. I know I do, but that's why it's like so important to me to say I would never unalive myself and I would never hurt anybody, but I said to her, when I said I was a follower of Christ, she gave me that narc smirk, and I said, what, are you okay? And she said, well, that's not where it's at. And I said, okay, where's it at? And what are you talking about? And she said, this woman was younger than me, right? And she said, well, it's not where it's at. Maybe she said, it's Lucifer is where it's at. And I said, Lucifer? And she said, yeah, we all worship Lucifer here. Lucifer's the god of light. She said, Lucifer is the real God of this world, not your God. And I said, whoa, wait a second. And that was like this moment where all I wanted to do was just get the hell away. I just wanted to run away. I wanted to get the hell out of there as quick as possible. And I said, well, okay. I said, I'm not throwing any shade on you. You can believe what you want to believe. And she said, well, we just feel bad for you because you believe in a God that, Lucifer's the one that's all powerful and he's the one that runs this world. And this is Lucifer's world. And I said, okay, sure. I mean, I understand that that's what and the Bible says we're in a demonic realm, right? Because God struck down Lucifer. And here we are. That's why we have so much evil in this world. That's why we have so many people that are these witches and these warlocks that, stalk people, these new age Luciferian. And they are new age Luciferian. You would never know. You would never know. She could be that your dentist, working on your teeth. She could be your nurse. She could be your librarian. She could be the town clerk. These are secret societies. They don't wear a t-shirt that says, hi, I'm a Freemason and I'm going to stalk you now until you unalive yourself. It's just not reality. They hide in the shadows and and then they come out of the shadows to stalk, and again, I should say not all Freemasons, right? And not all Eastern Stars and all that stuff. I want to make sure I say that. And but the ones that I've met
in all walks of life, no matter where you go, there's going to be good people and there's going to be bad people.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, we live in a world where evil seems to be in such abundance that Satan has perpetuated his ultimate lie in that, not that God doesn't exist, but that he doesn't exist, but that good doesn't exist. Good exists, but we see it's so prevalent. The darkness in people is so prevalent and just so immersed. The people that are dark, even though they may just be a few, they're so loud.
Right.
It's hard to see the good.
Absolutely. And a lot of them, aren't loud, right? A lot of them are just hiding in plain sight, but these women that, that this woman, especially this woman that said she was the functioning meth user and that she was, she worshiped Lucifer, and she's telling me that, the physical therapist, she did as well. And, and they all, and I was just like, wait a second. So you all do? And I was so green. Again, I didn't know anything about paganism or Luciferian, so self-proclaimed Luciferian witches and warlocks. And I didn't know anything about that world. Stuff, when I would hear stuff on witchcraft, I'd shut it off. I didn't want to be creeped out by it. Even Satanism, I would just shut it off. I didn't want anything to do with anybody that was practicing anything to do with Satanism or Luciferianism or any witches or warlocks. I didn't want anything to do with that world. And here I am. I put myself in that world, out of just being ignorant, just being out of ignorance. And so after that, we had that conversation. I said, you know what? I don't feel really well at all. So I'm going to, and again, this was what I noticed was, she was a functioning meth user. And what I noticed, especially with her, is that these people tend to be psychopaths. She was a psychopath. and she knew she was a psychopath. She said to me she wanted to be a better psychopath. It was like the running joke. But suddenly, it's not a running
Kind of
joke
people
when,
they relish in the idea. Like
right?
I
She
had
was,
a friend years ago. He professed to be a sociopath. He was like, "Yeah, I'm a sociopath." Blah 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 blah. I'm like, why would you say that? Like, why would you want to
well,
be that? Like, and even this woman I was
right.
involved with a few years ago, Revan knows who I'm talking about. She professed to be she was a self-professed narcissist. And Revan, you got an idea? Go ahead. Unmute yourself.
Someone that claims to be a functional method is like someone saying, I'm a functional alcoholic.
Yeah, it is. And I noticed that meth seems to be very prominent. Meth and witchcraft, especially, and they seem to go hand in hand.
Yeah,
Meth,
absolutely, I
yeah,
agree.
meth users, heroin users,
Yeah,
these people
that
seem to
one.
levitate towards witchcraft and the occult. And
Absolutely,
I would,
and these people tend to be empty vessels. They tend to have no empathy. They tend to be empty vessels, and they tend to, be practicing, of course, either Lucifer. I didn't know there's a difference, between someone who's practicing worshiping Lucifer and someone who's, worshiping Satan. I didn't even know there was a difference, and there is a difference. And
Yes.
this is what they
yes,
told me. These coven of witches told, this woman told me, and so when this woman was, she didn't have any empathy. There was just no empathy with her, and she was really relishing the fact that I was backing out of that, space that I was in with her. And then when I started backing out, I said, hey guys, you know what? I'll just catch you later. And then what happened is they started their associates when I got away from them and wasn't hanging out with them anymore. Because I didn't know all this, excuse my French, I didn't know all this dark fuckery. I didn't want anything to do with it. And then they started having their associates stalk me. I'd be at the thrift store and then I'd see the people that they were hanging out with would just appear at the thrift store. So much so, I sent one of the, I'll call her the head witch. She was one of the head women that all of them seemed to answer to her. So I texted her and I said, hey, could you tell your cult not to follow me anymore? And then, and then that just turned into, and I never should have did it. I never should have texted her, because I know now you never tell anybody your plans. And, I got into this situation where, 1 month later I was, I was in this, I'll tell you how I discovered I was being overtly stalked. So I was in the big city here, and I noticed that I was being followed. I was being followed everywhere I went in my vehicle. So I took 4 left turns. That's how you find out if you're being stalked or not. You take 4 left turns, and I was indeed being stalked. So after losing about over 15 cars, losing them, suddenly I had a helicopter over me, and I don't know. And the helicopter followed me for most of my way home. When I got home, and I don't know if it's just a coincidence. We'll just call that a coincidence. When I got home, because I'm not insinuating that the government's involved in this or anything, but when I got home, I was very scared. I was scared. I admit that I was scared, and I do have protection. I don't have an arsenal or anything, but I live in a rural area. So I have protection. I know how to use it. But normally I can tell you, I'm from a liberal state, and I don't. I'm not a person that likes, that ever even wanted, a weapon like that, like a gun. I was never interested in that at all. I just, but being out here in the woods, I decided it's probably the best thing is for protection in case something ever happens to me. At least I have protection with me if someone was to try to break in the middle of the night or something. But I never ever want to use it, on, in a scenario like where I have to protect myself or anything. So that's the situation. I went home and I pretty much looked through my house to see if anybody was in the house. I was scared to death. I didn't know what was happening. My heart was pounding. And I went everywhere. I went down my basement. I checked in everything. I cleared my house. And then, the next day I called my family member and I said, look, I know this is going to sound insane, but this just happened to me. And, she was just like, oh my Lord, what, call this one, call your, and I was notifying my family. And then, I let it go for that night. Right. And then the next day it just started. It started even more. It was another day of people following me, and then I noticed there was a pattern. It would seem to be a pattern of red cars, white cars, and blue cars. So it was red, white, blue, and it was just a pattern. And then they would have one headlight. Some of them would have one headlight on. And then I would be, having, it was just super suspicious and very suspect. And, I'd be in my vehicle and I'd have three white cars in a row drive by me with one headlight. And a lot of it was just psychological warfare, just to break me down. And that's what this program is. It's psychological warfare to break people down, to try to get a person to, snap and try to get a fraudulent mental health evaluation on them. I think a lot of people in the mental health field are in on this. I've never been diagnosed with bipolar or schizophrenia or anything like that. But that's what they do to people who are like, wait a second, this is happening to me. And this is, immediately, right? What are you going to do when this weird stuff happens and it starts to happen? You're going to call, you're going to call the police, right? You're going to call law enforcement. You're going to call people that have taken an oath to protect citizens and protect and the Constitution and stand by the Constitution. And, but I just didn't find a lot of help there, quite the opposite. And I knew that was, this was becoming a very odd situation, a very scary situation. And I felt very much on my own. And after I found, I researched, what happens. I was so green, I'm on DuckDuckGo and I'm just like, what is it called when 3 or more vehicles are following you? I just started to started to research, and then I found gang stalking, and then I found, that it became a lot more. I was like, gang stalking? What the hell is that? And, it was just another form of community organized stalking, right? To chase someone out of their house and chase someone out of their, and it's just this very diabolical situation that a lot of these secret societies and these neighborhood watch groups they're a part of it. I'm not everyone, right? Not everyone, not every neighborhood watch, but it really is prevalent, incredibly prevalent. And so, I mean, it's been, luckily, I was researching this diligently since May 2024. I won, well, I won't even go there, but, it's, so 6 months into it, I started looking into I was very scared. I was still, couldn't believe what was going on. It was very surreal. But again, I was trying to figure out, okay, well, why are they stalking? Why are they following me around? I even called law enforcement, and they showed up at my house, and I said, hey, do you think any of this has something to do with that I used to work for the DHS? And I had to speak up, and, she just looked at me like, what? Huh? Because she asked me, well, the first question, she said, why would they be stalking you? Why would they be doing this to you? What's, kind of like saying, what's so special about you? And I don't think there's anything special about me other than, I'm very much an empath. I've lived on the right side of history, and, I wasn't scared of her. I wasn't scared of this police officer, even though it seemed like she was trying to intimidate me. I said, she said, what do you think is happening here? Why would you think people are stalking you? And I said, well, maybe you can tell me. And she said, what do you mean? You want me to tell you? And I said, well, this is a very strange situation. I said, look, and I felt like she was almost like leading me down, trying to get me into like this kind of a 5150 situation. And I said, she's like, and I said, I've just been researching this stuff, this gang stalking stuff. And she said, what? What are you calling it? And I didn't know that was like this trigger word for law enforcement to like have them grab their handcuffs and get you in a 5150, because it's a setup. It's a complete setup, that word. And I said, I said, look, she says, oh, is that what you think is happening to you? And I said, all I know is this, certain things have happened. I told her what was happening with certain things. And I said, doesn't seem right. This is very strange. And And she said, well, I mean, I said, look, you know what? Because she was asking me these weird questions, like she was trying to, I really felt like she was trying to set me up. And I said, look, you know, I'm not a paranoid person. I've never been diagnosed with bipolar or schizophrenia or anything like that. I said, you know, this is really happening to me. And why would you ever think I would make this up? And she was kind of like so taken aback. And I did ask her because I was so green. Still, I was pretty green, you know, even though I was researching what was going on with me. I didn't understand what was happening and why these people were stalking me and all cars following me and why they happened to be red cars and white cars. And they had their headlights on in the middle of the day. And a lot of them had it seemed like it just seemed very odd, especially the one headlight, how many times I was seeing that a day and night. And I said to her, do you think it had anything to do with that? I kind of had to speak up when I worked at this, agency called the Department of Homeland Security. And she said, oh, wait, what? Where did you? And I told her where I worked, and she kind of like seemed to, and she was scratching her nose and scratching her head. And that's another signal. That's a bad sign. When people usually do that, that's when they're scratching their nose and they're coughing, and there's certain signals that these gang stalkers, I use that loosely, that these stalkers give one another to alert people that, that they're in on it, So, I just found it odd that she was like scratching her nose and, but it is what it is, but I kind of, listen to a lot of people that, there's thousands of us that have been isolated, and we can't reach out to family because, you don't want to reach out to family because you don't want to endanger them. And they put you in a bubble. They put you in isolation, really, pretty much. If I go out and I ride around, I can tell you I'm followed, heavily targeted, heavily. If I go into the city, I'm in a box. People can research. Here's a couple of people you can look into. Brian, too. He was a whistleblower for the Department of Defense. I do believe he worked for FEMA, but he had to become a whistleblower. And his name is Brian Tew, Bryan, last name TEW 2. And you can find all of his what he's been going through, because he's gone through hell. And he is you can look him up. He's going through he's just been years and years and years of this targeting just because he was a whistleblower. And they've just been trying to slow kill them. And, again, direct energy weapons, they are a real thing. They're very much a real thing, and people don't understand. Like they when you have conspiracy realist, that's what I would like to call myself. I'm a conspiracy realist. And, a lot of people don't understand that. Oh, sorry. I'm going to mute. I just wanted to say regarding the Maui in California and all the fires that are burning, people say, well, could they possibly directly be?
You're forgetting Myron May.
Right. Yes, Myron May. Yes, absolutely. And I'll just finish that. A lot of people don't understand that, DEWs can also be used on people, and they actually are being used on people. A good source, and he's definitely one of my heroes. His name was Myron May. Myron is his first name, Myron May. Very hard to find his interviews nowadays, but he gave so Myron May, and last name, no spelling, was May. He was a attorney that stumbled upon, he was an excellent attorney, he seemed like, I've listened to his last interview that he gave, and he was trying to blow the whistle on all of this. He was suffering from something called V2K. He had his girlfriend was trying to, I don't know what her situation was, but it seemed like she may have been a honeypot, because she got him to see mental health officials clinicians that, diagnosed him with, I'll leave that there. I mean, he was hearing voices, which is, now, when he looked into it, he was finding that they were, it's called something called voice to skull. And this is something that Dr. Robert Duncan created, and this is what's going to be unleashed upon people. It's been unleashed upon us. I'm one of the beta testers in this, and unfortunately, and again, nobody wants to have V2K. I don't have any love for Dr. Robert Duncan. I think he's a monster. He created this, and I think he very much enjoyed. He was a contractor for the CIA. He was a supposed, Dr. Robert Duncan was a supposed whistleblower. I don't think he was. I think he faked his own death. And he was the creator of, I do believe, remote neural monitoring, V2K. And these are things that targeted individuals. Another book you can get is called Guinea Pigs, Technologies of Control. And if I was a person that wasn't going through this yet, and I emphasize yet, the first thing I would be getting is I would be buying a copy of Guinea Pigs, Technologies of Control, because that's going to tell you what you're going to face. And it's not pretty, it's not pleasant, and it is scary. But this is what's happening. I'm one of the beta testers. Unfortunately, I've been put in this program against my will. We're called non-experimental subjects or something. I've never, I didn't care for these terminologies, these labels. But to get back to Myron May, and again, Guinea Pigs, Technologies of Control. That's what the book is called. Again, Guinea Pigs, Technologies of Control. It's written by Dr. John Hall. He's he's a doctor, but this was happening to his girlfriend at the time. She became a targeted individual. She fell into this slow kill program, like I'm in, like thousands of us worldwide are in, and he just started doing the research. And he started to look into remote neural monitoring, which is a very real thing. With their technology, they can read your mind. And then there's also something that they can see through your eyes, which is I do believe, my opinion, what Dr. Robert Duncan talks about it. It's a very real thing. They're doing this through nanotechnology. They're raining down on us all this chemtrails, and they're putting in our soda, our drinks, our food, and it's being poisoned with this, allegedly. I'll say allegedly, with this nanotechnology that is a self-assembling in our bodies, and then it self-assembles in our eyes as well, and they become, they can pretty much, I'll say allegedly, they can pretty much become, these are in the books. These are located, if anybody you can even check out Dr. Robert Duncan's book, Project Soul Catcher, and he talks about it, because this madman, this Dr. Mangala, Graham likes to refer to him as Dr. Mangala. He's like a new age Dr. Mangala, I think, Dr. Robert Duncan. That's why he had to fake his own death, because he created the V2K, the voice to skull. And now it's, it's a very scary thing. It's, you hear, it can make you hear, it's called, it can make you hear voices in your head that are not there. And it can make any sane person, it can drive them crazy with this technology, this voice to skull. This was used by the military. They used it, I do believe it was in the Iraq War first, where, all these American troops were looking at these Iraqi soldiers, and the government gave them, allegedly gave them this technology of, and Dr. Robert Duncan talks about this too, that they gave them these soldiers, the enemy, whatever, right? Quote unquote, this voice to skull technology. They used it on them, and they thought that, they had their weapons and everything. They were ready to, and then they heard Allah in their brains, in their mind, and it said, drop the weapon. This is Allah, drop the weapon. And they all dropped their weapons thinking it was Allah, and not knowing it was the United States military. And they got to take all of them in. And, and Dr. Robert Duncan tells that story. He was very proud of that story. And again, he's very proud of his creation. So that's the same creation that has plagued so many of us, and has made people that weren't suffering from schizophrenia. But here, they go to they don't know that they have V2K. They don't know that they're a targeted person. They go to the, mental, whatever, they go to a therapist to say, wait a second, I'm hearing voices, I don't know. And the therapist gives them drugs and says, gives them a diagnosis of schizophrenia. And how convenient is that? Now that's going to be like, they can just say that that's a potential mass shooter, and that's a person who is schizophrenic, and they have that on their record, and you can't get that off your record. And so many people, that's being used against them when it's not even the real situation. The real situation is V2K, and they don't even know it. They go to these mental health practitioners that, I'm going to say, my opinion is a lot of them are in on it. That's how they started, that's how they started in the 1930s. Even with this targeting program, it was called Zersetzung. It's called Zersetzung. And the Nazis used it. They used it to, they had these, Adolf Hitler started it. He had these individuals that were, assigned to stalk people, Jewish people and the disabled, and to just basically, the people that they wanted to get in, camps. And that was started in and that was started in Germany by Adolf Hitler in the 1930s. And here we are today. It's happening today. But this was, we had all these people that were, basically set up, not set up, but they were, they signed themselves up in Adolf Hitler's, pack of people of stalkers that would stalk innocent people. And this was going on in Germany, and Adolf Hitler started it, and it's called Zersetzung. And so people can even look up what Zersetzung means. It begins with a Z. I can spell it for you. And but again, Zersetzung is being used on so many me, and thousands of us right now. And so you can't go many places when you're in a bubble. You're in a bubble. So they are watching. And then it makes matters worse when then you have V2K and you think you hear these voices when it's actually, you think you're going crazy, but it's all a setup to make you look mentally ill so that you can be conveniently diagnosed with schizophrenia. Am I going too fast? Because I did want to bring up Byron May, but I want to just make sure I'm with everybody.
You're perfectly fine. Basically, what you're describing is discrediting the outspoken. Anybody who is outspoken about any particular issue is deemed crazy. I mean, we saw it with Michael Jackson, Kanye West. A lot of famous people will get labeled as crazy, and in an effort to discredit the message that they're trying to say. Was another famous actor, comedian, Dave Chappelle. He was having an issue with a lot of the people he was working with, and I think it had to do with money. I don't remember the specifics offhand at the moment, but he was going to speak out about it, and his higher ups told him, if you say anything, the whole world will think you're crazy by the time you get home.
Absolutely.
And that was pretty much the end of his career. Same with Michael Jackson, same with Kanye West. It was a major thing. So making people think that they're crazy, or making the general public think that that person is crazy, especially if they have been very outspoken about something that serious as to what you're talking about, that's definitely
they make their lives, they make our lives a living hell. These are people that are whistleblowers, dissenters, truthers, people that they're watching. Again, in an interview 2013, I think your mic is on, Reverend. I think your mic is on, Reverend.
I want to mention the thing about Dave Chappelle again. Here, real quick. They went after him because he had this comedy style that really did not resonate with Bill Cosby or Oprah. And they were trying to cancel, basically, he had 2 good seasons of the Chappelle Show, which I liked. It was pretty good. But they offered him $50 million to do a 3rd season. He said no. He went to Africa, the country, but he also went to live on a farm. They also went after Martin Lawrence too. He had a stroke. Now he went on Oprah saying, "Look, hey, you got these brothers wearing a dress. He's in a movie where they want him to wear a dress." He went into his locker room, and I was like, "Well, why is there a dress in here?" And he's like, "I ain't wearing it. I'm not going to wear a dress." Cat Williams mentioned Kevin Hart wore a dress. So did Tyler Perry as Medea. And this was one thing that really is against. So that's
it's
why
a
they
rite
went
of
after him.
passage thing.
Yeah, but they didn't want to wear it. So my once had a stroke. They got to him. DMX, they got to him. Cat Williams, they got to him because he mentioned parties at Diddy's house. Party within a party. And it was bad. It was a satanic, demonic shit in the hip hop in the rap community. Very, very, very insane. I'm good.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Revan. And this is becoming far too common. Noble, like you were saying before, this is becoming far more frequent for people who are outspoken and is fastly becoming a commonplace thing. Do you think that it's going to be commonplace used on everybody? And at which point, I would ask, what would be your thoughts regarding the projection timetable of how soon something like that would just start being used in full effect on the American people or even the people of the world?
I would say it's coming very soon. There's such a thing as called Agenda 2030. And they're going to be, we were the beta testers. I'm a beta tester for this, and I didn't want to be. I never knew this was happening to me. I never knew I was in this that they had me in a covert stalking situation. I didn't know I was being covertly stalked for 22 years since 2002. And, and then overtly stalked. I mean, so many people right now, I can't even begin to tell you, are being stalked covertly. And they don't know. And this is worldwide. And it's going to be almost every single civilian, every single that isn't in the club. And everything, of course, every, federal officer that is a whistleblower or that spoke truth to power or, is seen as a troublemaker because they're a good person. And they, again, spoke truth to power. They're going to find themselves in the same position I'm in. And again, I've been isolated, from a lot of my family, a lot of my friends, and then I'm very also. I mean, the only people they let me talk to. I mean, I've joked with Revan that, he's always called himself a glitch in the matrix, and he's a glitch in the matrix. Because they only let us talk, and I hate to say let us, but it is very real. They only let me talk to people that are already targeted. And also, and then, or perpetrators, so, I mean, I thought for the longest time, because I had met Revan over 5 years ago on a social, like a global CB radio app, because I was bedridden at the time and mostly bedridden. I mean, it was just a series of, ever since speaking up, it's just been a series. My life has utterly been it's just been a series of unfortunate incidents health-wise. Whether it's just been, it is just, not just the cancer, not just the amputations. It's just been, I felt like, man, I don't understand why I got this bad cloud. I got this cloud over me, that I've had since 2002. Just happened to be 2002, and when I look back and I did the math, and then I looked at the people that were in my life, even as my relationships, I found out quickly, being overtly stalked, that, when I did the math on the people that I was involved with romantically, they were in on this. They were something called honeypots, so they were spies. They were basically spies. And I know that makes me sound insane, but it's true. They were what they can also call is like a handler. I hate that word, handler, but, they put us in a script. They put me in this.
They send this person to keep you in check or to make you just put you in endless situations to where they essentially break you. They break your mind, kind of like a narcissist would do in their relationship, just make their partner go absolutely fucking crazy to the point where they fucking crack.
Yes,
or
exactly.
just get them to the point where they're just completely under that person's thumb.
I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. You were saying that I don't want to interrupt you. You just said that person is under their spell, did you say?
Sorry, I'm having some mic troubles. Somebody tried to call me earlier, so it took me off of loudspeaker. But if you guys can hear me okay, I was
I can
saying
hear
in
you
general
loud and
term,
clear. Yeah.
you can hear me?
Yep, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. Basically, what I was saying is, these quote unquote handlers will either push you to the point where you go absolutely fucking crazy, or they get you to the point where they have you under their complete submissive control to where you are completely submissive and under their thumb.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in their setups, these people come into your life and you think it's just, oh, wow, you just met them at a club or you met them at, some social event, and they are plants. They themselves have handlers, and they themselves have a script, and you're their target. You're their target to seduce. You're their target to flirt with. You're their target. They have an assignment and you're their assignment. And I mean, I was, a couple people's assignment, and they were honeypots. And, and it was just, it really is. So to look back on it, it's just such a really disgusting feeling, to know that for so many years, I've been, not even knowing that I've been, just, they put me in this, I don't know, they put me in this box. And to watch me like I'm their, this experiment. I'm this, white mouse that they're experimenting on, which is exactly what they've been doing. They say that this is for experimental. They say this is so Brian too talks about that this is a CIA, MK Ultra CIA mind-based control, program. So that again, that's CIA, MK Ultra. I think he says it a lot better, smoothly. CIA MK Ultra mind-based program, mind control-based program. So I mean, this is no joke. I mean, this is I'm in a slow kill program. Their whole thing is to all these stalkers and everything, and all these secret societies that have banded together to stalk us, the targeted people, persecuted people, the people that are placed unjustifiably in this program. And again, anybody can be placed in this program. If you piss off the wrong Freemason, you can be placed in this program. If you piss off the wrong judge, the wrong cop, you can be placed in this program. And this is no joke. This is a slow kill program, and they can use DEWs. A lot of people, I mean, I'm not going to talk about that because it's just, I mean, that's when they can really get out the men with the white coats if you ever dare talk about DEWs. But a lot of people, all right, let's just put it out there. I'll say allegedly. I mean, I even hate to talk like that because so many people, it's just suffering. We're suffering. We are suffering in silence, and because a lot of people don't understand how dark this gets, that, these military weapons are being used on us to slow kill us in our homes, not even just outdoors when we're traveling. I mean, it's in our homes. Our smart meters have been set up to be used against us. And I think that's what they did in California. They blew up some of those smart meters, allegedly, right? And maybe just by mistake, right? They just blew up and started
they did it all that on purpose. I personally work fire mitigation. Everything that was done, that was absolutely criminal. The whole damn thing, that was complete arson. Gavin Newsom needs to be in fucking prison right now. And the fact that he's not, and Pam Bundy hasn't fucking had his ass indicted and put his ass in prison, tells me they ain't on our fucking team.
No.
Okay, either these people are not on our team, or Pam Bundy needs to get the fuck off her fucking knees and stop blowing people at Fox for her fucking next career move. She needs to fucking do her fucking job.
Absolutely.
Because that man, Gavin Newsom, needs to be in fucking prison. I'll tell you that right now, and I won't fucking pull no punches. And I'm sorry to cut you off.
You gotta understand that Gavin Newsom. I say it wrong. I say Gavin Newsom, but Gavin Newsom is, he's a Jesuit. And this is and you guys know what the Jesuits were, right? They were military order of the Catholic Church, and a lot of the Jesuits. Bill Gates was a Jesuit. I don't know if we allowed to say that man's name still, that demon. So he was a Jesuit. He is a Jesuit. Fauci is a Jesuit. Cuomo is a Jesuit. A lot of Jesuits for some reason are involved, and Jesuits stick together. And unfortunately, I won't even talk about the president. Okay, so people need to come to their own. I mean, unfortunately, I don't really have any good news to bring you guys today. Unfortunately, I want to talk solutions. That's why I've reached out to some people. I've tried to look for community in this quote unquote TI community, but I can tell you what I found thus far is, and I'll probably be blacklisted for saying this, but there really is no community. There's a lot of cliques, and if you don't fit in the clique, right? And if a moderator doesn't like you, or you're speaking out of tone, right? You're in a chat room and you're just, you're in there for some kind of community because you feel so isolated. A moderator can be, moderators are gatekeepers. These gatekeepers can just shut you up. They can censor you. They can block you from the chat. And there goes your social. There goes your any kind of social that social system, right? Again, socializing. There goes your socializing with that community. So these moderators in these chats that are, and a lot of these people, there's certain people that are hosts and they are targeted themselves, persecuted people themselves, and they've been unjustly put into this targeted program. But then, when they have these chats that tend to be, unfortunately, they tend to be cliquey. But again, these people, these individuals, and I don't blame them. I'm the same way now. I learned my lesson from a very bad situation that I got myself into. But I trusted somebody I shouldn't have trusted. And that, pretty much blew up in my face because this person he's a raging covert narcissist. And has a raging mental illness, and he's a monster. And, he's got me on it. I'm in his sights, and he's trying to win all these, win people over in the TI community thinking that I'm this special agent that's out to get them. And I'm writing down their names, and I'm, which is complete, absolute bullshit. This guy was mad because, I was going to try to make it work with him as a roommate, and, because he needed help. He wanted me to help him out. And I thought, well, he's street smart. Maybe this can work out. It turned out to be a nightmare. I locked him out of my house 7 days. I gave him money over $300 to go back from the shelter. He was in a shelter when he reached out to me for help. And now he's just rewriting history. And I'm this worst person imaginable. This homeless transient guy who, is a covert narcissist and hates women, and actually took the money that I gave him. And this is not too long ago. This was April. Yeah, took the money I gave him the next day. I gave him well over $300 that he asked for to get him a bus ticket, extra money, and get him back into, this Jackson, Michigan shelter. And he ended up, victimizing another targeted female. And this is what some targeted guys are, they're, not all, but, they think, well, okay, I can't ever be in a normal relationship because I'm going to be set up. It's going to be a honeypot. So why not try to find a targeted female, right? Because that's the only people they only allow us. I know that's such a bizarre way to put it, but they only allow us to be with other targeted people because you don't want to bring a normie, a bot, or anything. I don't even want to. I don't know who would want to be with a bot or a sheeple or a normie, but I wouldn't want to be. I just wouldn't want to. I wouldn't. And I'm an old woman now. I'm not looking to be in a relationship. But, you have these young guys that are unjustifiably put into these situations. But with this guy, he's just incredibly he's just a psychopath. He's a very good liar. He's like rewriting history, trying to rewrite history. That's why I have a YouTube page. I'm able to actually show, he said, oh, let me imitate him. She currently works for the DHS and she's targeting everybody. I mean, it's so crazy that people, there's just some people that are already, they might already not like you. So they're going to believe this psychopath, this covert narcissistic, monster. And they're going to believe his version because either they're in it. Demonic, Reverend calls him the demonic gerbil. He's just a very disturbed, he's a very good liar. He's a grifter, and he's got the ear of some moderators that I do not think are female. I don't think they're targeted females because they've fed into this very dangerous man's smear campaign that he has against me, trying to get me killed. I mean, it's definitely no joke because this guy has been doxing my name, my address, my picture, a picture that I was in pain in, because he's a monster. He's been doxing it for well over 2 months now on his YouTube page, and he's a homeless transient. He has almost 300 subscribers, and he used to be a drug addict for 20 years. but he's just recently coming off Suboxone now. And now, you know, he's an avid, you know, weed smoker, but he smokes it pretty much, you know, he's got his pre-roll at night, and then he launches into me because I'm his favorite target, mocks me. And this guy came on to me when I had him here. Within the first hour, he said, we can make this a boyfriend-girlfriend thing. And when I said no, I didn't know this guy was setting up his, you know, my demise after saying no to him, that I wasn't interested like that. And, you know, and I dropped it, and I thought it was no big deal. And, you know, he ended up saying I was the one. I mean, even though he literally has no teeth. He has like 3 teeth. I'm not even kidding. And, you know, it's just, this guy is just a monster. He's disgusting. He's vile. And for him to say that, it was such an insult. And he also, you know, I have it on footage that he hit on me. And, you know, he said that I said it. I'm just like, oh dear. You know, it's so disgusting how many people do not have their own discernment. They don't have their own God-given intuition, their own God-given discernment. I mean, I got to pray for discernment every day. You know, I don't think I just show up I wake up in the morning and I have amazing discernment. It's not reality. I have to pray for it. I have to pray for better judgment, pray for better intuition and God-given, you know, and pray to God for, like, discernment is crucial. But there's so many people, there's a lot of people that are just, I hate to say it, but they're lazy. Right. So they just rely on anybody who, you know, if he comes off like, well, seems like he's, you know, he's not stuttering or anything. He doesn't seem like he's lying. Yeah, he's vile looking, and he's, you know, looks like a psychopath. But no, I mean, I'm going to believe him on this, you know, even though this guy's a psychopathic grifter. You know, I've just the story that
flying monkeys.
Exactly, and he has a lot of flying monkeys. And I'll tell you,
they throw out this freaking gaslighting and smoke screens
flying monkeys,
and all this projection. Yeah. You did what I did. I'm gonna blame you for what I did, and all my flying monkeys are gonna fucking regurgitate it and believe it and all this other bullshit, despite all evidence to the contrary. It's so commonplace, sister.
Exactly, and he does have the ear of these, you know, it's a woman who claims to be targeted, you know, I'll say allegedly, but, you know, this is a woman that I didn't even know who she was. And she sits in his chat, you know, hanging on his every burp and his every fart and, you know, saying, you know, oh, you know, you're so brilliant. Please leave up this stream. And I started to become very suspicious of her because she says, oh, she called me a lizard, and I don't even know this person. I know that, you know, she thinks she's an alien. She has said in his chat, the chats that she rots in as his moderator, and she's a gatekeeper. She's one of his gatekeepers, you know, so you can't defend yourself. If you don't have over 100 and, you know, over 50 subscribers or even know how to use StreamYard, you're not going to be able to defend yourself against a monster like that. You're going to have his flying monkeys too, spreading it all around that it's you and not him. So I think she's very suspicious. I mean, it's on my page. You guys feel free to, you know, subscribe. I have my proof on there. This guy was trying to say as well. Let me get back to the flying monkeys for a second. He has 2 other flying monkeys. He has one that calls herself, you know, I don't want to say it. It's a nickname that Grimm has given himself, and which he really is, regarding being a glitch. And you guys can figure that out, right? She had just recently changed her name. She was another handle. And both of these women recently, when I called them out on it, they've changed their handle now. It's incredibly suspicious. But now they've changed their handle. And so the other woman, who is a mod in his chats, she had actually, I was watching one day because he thinks I'm obsessed with him, but this guy, I'm watching his, because I have a lawyer now. I have to get out the transcripts. I have to I have to print out transcripts of all this stuff that he threatens me, all the mocking he does, all the dehumanization he does of me constantly. Imagine almost 8 hours a day for 2 months, doxing my name, doxing my address, doxing a picture that I was in pain in. I mean, this is a special kind of psychopath. He's nuts and he knows it, but he's good at lying. He's good at lying, and he's entertainment. I think for some people, this is like, he's a dumpster fire. He's a shit show. And they like watching him for entertainment. Just, you know, it's like a Jerry Springer episode. And they can sit back and say, well, at least I'm not like, you know, my life might be bad, but I'm not like that shit show. But, you know, it gets worse when he smokes up, because then he launches. And this has been over 2 months where he's ripped into me. You know, and I think this guy most definitely is a plant. I think he's a failed plant and, you know, what we call a perpetrator. I think he is targeted, but I think he started off as a perpetrator, and he's such a mess that he failed to even being a perpetrator, a gang stalker, and then he became just a rogue. He just became a rogue gang stalker. That's what I think he is. He's very good at gang stalking. He's gang stalked me now for well over 2 months. And, I'm in this smear campaign with him. He's trying to get everybody in on it, and just trying to basically kill me. He's trying to kill me, because when he was here, he told me a lot of disturbing stuff about his life, and one of them was an accusation from his very young niece. And so, this guy, his whole thing, but when I got him out of here, he went into like damage control immediately, trying to, make sure that I had, just character assassination right off the bat immediately, so that I would come off, like a liar, like this agent, like this double agent working for the DHS, and I still work there. He would tell that bullshit lie over again and again and again, even though he knows I showed him the receipts that it was my name, my birth name against Janet Napolitano, and I showed him my paperwork with my attorney's names on it, the suit I had, all the legalities, and this guy still lied about me. He wanted to create doubt within the community so that they would think that I was this double agent, that I was the perpetrator and not him. When I think this guy is just, to me, it's very obvious that he's a failed gang stalker. He's a failed perpetrator. And they don't even want him as a gang stalker. So now he's just homeless transient trying to, wreak havoc on everybody because his life is so miserable, and this is where it is. And, I do with these women, the other one said to him, I was watching one day because I have to report every time because he's bringing me up nonstop constantly. And then gaslighting, right? And it says, she's obsessed with me. And here I am, like, thinking, my God, will you just stop, just tearing into me and doxing me? Where I it's like I'm forced to do this every day so I can, report and try to get his channel down. And, because he's a creature. He is a menace. He's a one-man wrecking ball in this community, and he's dangerous. And of course, and then he has these 2, I'll say 3. Let me tell you his 3 mods, and then I'm going to be quiet. He's so the one of them, the other one is she thinks she's this glitch in the matrix, and she actually, I was watching one day, and he actually tagged her in the video that he made for her. She cashed apped him money. This is a moderator. He made her a moderator after this. He cash apped her money to recite his lies about me. So continue the never-ending smear campaign. And she asked him to recite the lies, and he did it. In 2 videos, he recited all his lies, that I was this and I was that, and I was actively working for the DHS, and all these lies from this monster. And then he made her a moderator. And now, that's 2 women. And I think and she claims to be a targeted individual, just like the other female that is his mod that changed her name to hair handle recently. And she claims to be a targeted female. But I can tell you, no targeted female in this slow kill program is going to, egg on a smear campaign from a mentally ill man, and egg him on to get me killed. And that's exactly what these 2 women have done. And that's exactly. And then his third moderator, and I'm telling you, they watch his chat. They are his flying monkeys. They protect him. They protect this monster, and he's looking for more women. Let me tell you, he went down to, he took the over $300 that I gave him to go on a bus and get the hell out of my town. And he took that money, pocketed it, and then called this woman who he was best friends with her at the time, he said. And she was another targeted female. And he said, look, she left me here. I'm stranded in New England. I got nothing. So this monster lied, this liar, this grifter, he lied. And then this woman gave him more money, well over $120 to get him to where, can you imagine, to get her to take a bus where she is. And then he went on to victimize her. And she was, she didn't, when she met him and heard awful how ungrateful he is, and how much he did the same deal with me. He wanted me to fix his life. He wanted me to get him a birth certificate, give him $20 so he could get him a license. It was just non-stop. This guy was looking for basically a mother who he can have sex with. And I'm being graphic with you guys. I know that we're all adults here, and that's exactly what this guy's looking for. He's looking for a strong woman because he's a weak man. And he's looking for a strong woman to take care of him. And, he's a perpetual child. He's a man child. He's like just this. I mean, he's got the mentality of an angry 11-year-old autistic child. And when he was here, I just couldn't even, I was trying to contemplate how to get him out of my house because it was so bad. Just constant bitching, constant resting bitch face, constant hellish nightmare with this guy. And it was just like the longest 7 days of my life. So, I finally, she gave him well over $120, and now he's there. He's homeless where she is because she wants nothing to do with him, because he was looking, I don't know if he was looking for sex with her, but she just wanted nothing to do with him. She contacted me, and well, we found each other, and she was just like, look, this is awful. This guy is truly awful. He's a mess. He's a liar. He's a grifter. He's just ungrateful. And he is. He's an ungrateful sloth. And she found out the hard way. And now he sits in Jacksonville, North Carolina, in a Walmart parking lot, all day. And his whole full-time job is to mock me, try to dehumanize me, dox me each day, for over 2 months now, trying to get me killed. And that's what he's done. And I've been reporting, and YouTube has been doing nothing. YouTube has done absolutely nothing. And so I want to just say, secondly, one of his other mod, and this is the third mod, and this is the only, and he mods everybody. Let me tell you, he'll mod you quickly so that you can censor his chat, and you can. He love bombs people. He's a typical covert narcissistic incel. He hates women, but he love bombs women if he needs something from you. And he's very much into the bro nation. He'll say, hey, bro, because he's collecting. He wants to collect more and more guys like him so that they can be his little devil's minions and fight his battles for him, because he thinks people are so gullible and so stupid and easily manipulated. And, he said that about a friend of mine, David A., and that he was easily manipulated and he's so gullible. And then he went after them, and then he love bombed them. And then they started to learn that, wait a second, this guy's a stage 4 cancer. He's a full of shit. He's a grifter. They learned the hard way. And, but let me end with this, just regarding the mod situation. So third mod that always goes in there that, so this guy can go on and rave on and rave on. And this guy is a senior. And his handle is I'll just say close to son of a bitch. Okay. Son of a something. I won't go I just call him son of a bitch because that's what he is. He throws out scripture all through this guy's rants and raves and evil demonic rants that this guy's on and he throws out scriptures and eggs on this guy's smear campaign regarding me. And this guy's not even targeted. He's just a very bored senior. But I can tell you, I honestly think at this point, I just think all of his mods are agents. And I just think they're, and he's just too stupid enough to see it. He's just too much of an egotistic grifter who thinks everything he says is magic and amazing and incredible. And everybody wants to know him. He's just delusional. He hasn't, it's surreal that all this has happened to me in the time spent, my overt stalking for a little over a year. And this guy has been so damaging to my life, and he's only been 7 days. He was only here 7 days. And he will go on he will rewrite history while he was here. Oh, and she did this, and she looks like a melting candle, and she's so ugly, and she's disgusting, and she's got it just goes on and on. And he's just like, I'm the king of the roast. She better not have a StreamYard on Sunday nights. And, because that's what I really want to do. I want to have StreamYards on Sunday nights so other, targeted, persecuted people can actually meet one another and network and use their own discernment and, just not feel so isolated and start to talk about solutions instead of have everything surrounded by, instead of talking about, instead of just gossip or, this guy wants to make everything about him and he's just a monster. He's not, he wants to be relevant so bad, but he's so incredibly irrelevant. But can you imagine somebody who's doxing, you're targeted already, right? You're already where I can't go to the police, and he knows this. Most targeted guys know targeted females can't go to the police. That's why we face really incredible amounts of danger by people that, that's people like that guy in Jacksonville, North Carolina, because he knows I can't go to the police.
Darlin, he reminds me of the guy that Tim and I know very well. He reminds us the guy in Maine. We call him the Noid from Domino's. Very immature, all by himself, all that shit. The guy in North Carolina is equivalent to the guy we call the Noid.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, like, this guy has been, and he revels in it too. Like, if I get upset or, and he's just the worst. Actually, I mean, I don't say this lightly. He's possibly the worst damaging person I've ever met in my life. And I don't say that lightly. He is just so, in every woman, right? And I really do believe he hates women. I do believe, I'm not going to say anything about some of the stories he told me, and I don't even know if he told me these stories to make me feel bad for him, because narcissists are very, they're all about, they target empaths. They look for empaths, and I kind of let my guard down with this guy. And I thought, okay, well, maybe we can make this work as roommates because he's so street smart. I mean, when this guy got here, I didn't know, well, he asked for a hug and I gave him a hug, but I didn't know he was mentally, he was going into full blown psychosis. By the time he got to my house, he was in full blown psychosis where everybody he was seeing was a reptilian. And I said, at one point I showed him my eyes and he said, oh, well, okay, you're all right. You're not a reptilian. And, it's just been over 2 months now of him showing my picture, my thermal picture that I was in pain in because I was getting hit. Okay. And that's all I'll say about that. But when you download a thermal camera, and you can see places of hot spots on your body, and not your average sheeple or bot or NPC or even person that is a conspiracy realist but not going through this is going to know that if you download a thermal camera on your phone, you're going to see that more than likely especially if you're placed in this kill program that I am in, you're going to see hot spots on your body. And that's what he's doxing me with. A picture. This is how disgusting, what a monster he is. A picture that I was in pain in. He's doxed that picture almost over 2 months now with my name and my address.
I got
Laugh. He gets complete joy out of it.
You have a thought?
There's a few thoughts here because I really dislike this individual. So I'm going to move in a couple of directions. One is protection. So I'm not here to tell any individual how to live their lives. Okay, that's not the case. But I do suggest inside of this context, that you guys use your American right that you have. And there's a few things I would suggest.
Yep.
Getting a dog, for starters, a big one. And there's this guy on YouTube. He's DIY Canine. He's a retired police dog trainer. He does little tutorials online to get the easy stuff done. You can find protection dog trainers locally somewhere. Someone's doing the job somewhere. There's always one somewhere. So that's a direction I would point you in. The second would be ethically and responsibly for as much as you physically can, because there is a legality. We don't need your name running through things and getting you flagged and found and so on and so forth. But gun clubs. Get involved with gun clubs. No one's going to want to hurt you when you're surrounded by people with firearms. And the best part is a lot of the gun clubs in the United States are anti-government in nature. So they would inherently seek to protect a person like you. I think the 3%ers is something like that, if I'm not mistaken. Then moving forward, after we've taken care of protection, because the biggest thing is you got to keep you safe. That's outwardly. So a firearm can protect you outwardly. A dog can protect you outwardly. The next one is inwardly. Now, most of the time, people would suggest some form of religion. I normally tell people to go join a martial art. Right? You're not going to change any one person's theological worldview in the religious context. And if you can't do that, then you're going to have a hard time building them up. But martial arts, on the other hand, is all about, peace of mind, moving forward, meditation, finding some sort of zen and focus, and so on and so forth, which is very similar to a religious activity. And as well, you learn to kick people in the face. I'm a strong advocate of kicking people in the face. And when that doesn't work, just remember, punch them in the throat. You're going to break your fingers punching them in the face, and you're going to catch some nasty disease scraping their freaking teeth. But punch them in the throat. They stop breathing. You start laughing. It's a great way to start the day. I strongly recommend it. Now, moving forward after that, this is the thing that I don't. This guy is nuts. Okay, like he's a grade A whack-a-mole, because only those who are truthfully in the know understood what David Icke was teaching. Okay, and the reptilian context of what David Icke was teaching was purely allegorical. He was illustrating that the individuals that were running the world are just sick people. Very much like how we hide the serious inside of the silly, David Icke had done the same with the reptilian thing. So much so that a freaking TV show called V was on TV, and they took that down real quick. And the problem is that that's like white belt conspiracy level stuff. That's like we create something that is 100% fake, so that we can attribute all of the ills of the world onto that one thing. Now, the ills of the world are real, but we can't. I'm not allowed to just say like Israel's a fucking Jewish problem. I can't say that, but I can't say that Talmud fucking promotes pedophilia. I can't say that, and neither could he. Not back in the day, but when he figured it out, he just, space Jews, just like Dave Chappelle. He created something, and it was the lizard people. The lizard people was a story that was used because the United States of America was not prepared to actually understand the atrocities that the state of Israel was doing. So you can't speak ill of those individuals because there was that one guy that did it. Okay. So the problem with these fucking whack-a-moles is that they're telling people that they're fucking lizard people. And unless you're fucking Jewish, you're not a lizard person. And Jewish people aren't lizards, guys. It's an allegorical way of teaching what Zionism was doing to the world, without actually pointing a finger and being prejudicial at any one religious group. Because we've beaten our chest till we're blue in the face when we've explained that, like, the good God-fearing Jew that's at the synagogue, you got to protect them, and like the not so nice ones that are like in Israel and their government structure, and the ones that bow down to the Talmud and refuse to go by the Torah, and the ones that believe that Jesus is in hell, fucking boiling in human excrement, those guys need a reality check. But we couldn't do that back in the 70s, 80s, 90s. You couldn't speak in that way. So why were they calling David Icke Jesus? They were trying to tell us that he was teaching in parables. Go ahead, Reverend. Sorry, boss. Because I don't like this fellow.
He came after me. I have a good relationship with my folks. Always have. I look up to my dad, and stuff like that. So I mean, it's just that he's jealous of what people have. Like, he talked about his mom, how my mama didn't love me. Well, whose fault is that? I mean, shit. I mean, I got good parents. They're up there in age. I take care of them. And the thing is, I mean, anybody who has a good rapport with the parents, and I mean, it's a family thing. You were raised you were raised to respect your elders, mom, dad, aunt, uncle, grandparents, brother, sister. Um, I'm the oldest of two. My younger sister, my little sister lives in the
Just be
Midwest.
careful. No. Please I just want you to be careful because he more than likely that monster is going to see this stream, and he just recently said that he was going to come after my mods, right? And you do the moderating thing. You help me on Sunday. We do that. You help me with the StreamYard. You host and help me out there, and sometimes you do also moderation. You do the moderator thing. And he recently said yesterday or today, I can't even keep up with all the demonic shit this guy says. But he said, this monster said, he said, I'm going to actually swear here, guys. So I don't often swear, but this is what he said, and it made no sense to me. But, and I think then it did make sense. He said, he said this on stream the other day. He said, I can't fuck with her, but I can fuck with her mods. He said, I can look into if they have children. I can look into if they have parents. I can fuck with that. I can fuck with their friends, their family. And he said, they just don't know what they're doing when they're taking on me. So I'm going to go after her mods. That's what this mental patient said. And the reason why he said he can't fuck with me is because I'm pushing back. I'm not going to be intimidated by a disgusting, vile, coward, covert, narcissistic incel where he's just a irrelevant clown. He's an irrelevant, pathetic clown, and he's pissed. He's pissed that he's an irrelevant, pathetic clown that has been on drugs for over 20 years, right? And he wants to blame everybody else and take zero accountability for that. But he's a grifter. He's a very good liar. He convinces very gullible people, people that are easily manipulated, that he's a genius. Just because he can say what's going on with the nanotech in your body. And I can tell you what's happening with this nanotechnology in our body. It's not because I'm this government agent. It's because I can crack open a book and read about it, and the people that talk about it are Dr. John Hall. He talks about, the nanotech in the jab. Can I even say that? I don't even know if I can say that. I'll stay away from that. Okay. He talks about,
say it all day.
He talks about, I don't want to get, there's certain people that are really hell-bent after me and they'll hit report. So I'll just say allegedly there was stuff in that. Allegedly there was stuff in us.
They can suck my dick backwards.
Okay, fair enough. Allegedly there was, let's just say this. Allegedly there was bad things in some of those shots. We'll say that. Okay. Is that okay if I'll say allegedly, and I'm not a doctor.
Preach that truth.
I hate to say, I want to make sure I say this. I'm not a medical practitioner. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. I'm not an EMT. So that's just something I heard. And I'll say it's supposedly there's some bad things in there. Allegedly, there's some bad things in there. So again, in America, we're we're losing our freedom of speech here quickly, but with regards to what I was saying, guys, I just forgot what I was saying. Do you know what I was saying? I forgot.
That's okay. So what I'm going to tell this lady right now is that she can have our StreamYard on Sunday. She can make an entire segment. This girl can do whatever she wants to do. She wants to fly under this banner. You fly under this banner. You might want to do a little bit of research about me. I'm reasonably vulgar and I say some really nasty stuff. So you may not want to get behind me, and that's okay. I can appreciate that as well. But yeah, I totally give her the banner because we have ethical hackers that watch and follow us, right? So we would love it if individuals would start to report and do these things, because then we have an electronic footprint to follow. And you already have a reasonable suspicion as to who they are, which makes it that much easier. So these people don't actually report to us. If you ever put me in an interrogation room and say, give me up all the hackers, I can't. All I can say is I've seen what they've done on our behalf.
I think this guy's a hacker. I think this guy's he very much knows his technical stuff. I think he's a hacker, and I want to just and I also think that he is. I honestly think he's a failed. I don't want to say failed perp, right? But he's a perp. I think he's being targeted because he was a failed government perp, and I think he's a failed became just a failed blacklisted plant. And he went rogue, and he's just been aimlessly, just ruining people's lives ever since. And I think I was just saying regarding the drugs, he's blamed everybody for being on drugs. He's been on drugs for 20 years and he's coming off Suboxone now. And, it ain't pretty. He's blaming me. So that's why, he wakes up in the morning talking shit about me. Then the stream is at afternoon, wakes up. He refers to me. He said recently the other day that bitch makes good content. That's what he said about me. That bitch makes good content. That's what he said about me. Being on what he meant by that is when he talks about me, launching into me, trying to dehumanize me, ranking on me, doxing me, that, he gets money. He gets money for people that are basically, gang stalkers. He'll get gang stalkers sending him money to just tear into me and dox me more. His moderators, they've given him money. The female moderators, the male moderator, son of a bitch there, the one that's not even targeted, that old man, these people are giving him money to keep up this smear campaign to get me killed every day, every single day. And this is what, I'm the content with the morning, basically almost the minute he wakes up, and I've talked to other targeted, I've talked to other targeted females, and I said, another targeted female said, just gray rock him, right? Because he's a covert narcissistic incel who hates women, and he's just utterly miserable, and he's just a nasty, nasty, nasty thing. He's just demonic. I really, he has mentioned in past streams just a couple weeks ago that he used to practice Satanism. And I think once you practice, and he has a pentagram on his arm that's laced with, needle marks, and he's got a 666, like a messed up 666 on his wrist, and he shows this, right? Because he's a pathetic clown. And then he makes fun of it. Oh, look, I couldn't even do a right pentagram. I couldn't do the right kind of pentagram. Oh, look, the 666 looks like a 999. Ha, 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 ha. Well, son of a bitch, you were trying to be a warlock. You're just a failed piece of shit warlock. Doesn't mean you weren't, Satan's not, he's got, I'm telling you, that boy, and I'll call him a boy because he acts like a boy. That little boy, that little angry, autistic 11-year-old boy is, he's got demons inside him. And I know that. I'm telling you, when I've seen him, like he was making fun of that I got cancer, right? And he was saying, calling me all these names in the book. And he got really close one stream. And this was only a couple days ago because he talks about me again. He talks about me morning, noon, and night. I am this guy's obsession. And he says, because he's trying to get me killed. That's it. It's so obvious to me. Why would you put up a name, a targeted female's name, address, picture every day, almost every single day, and then talk shit about her and then try to raise doubt in the community that I'm some kind of special agent that's targeting everybody. And people, I'm telling you, there's some people that will actually believe him because they're easily manipulated. They're gullible. And they don't have, maybe they don't have a friend. And this guy, comes off like he's just, he's smoking pot all the time. And, and again, this is a very isolating program to be in. There's a lot of lonely people in this program. They isolate you. It's very real. I can't go outside and I'm telling you, I'm a people person. I love making people laugh, and I can't just go into the community, go to a farmer's market and talk to somebody and strike up a conversation. I'll tell you, that person is going to be a plant. They put that whole farmer market is going to be plants that know the situation, that I'm marked for death, that I'm a targeted person, and they're going to, and it's elderly people, it's children, it's young people, and it's the age is all over the place. Again, it's these people in these secret societies that have signed up for this date, this very time where Mark and the Beast is coming, that's why they put out those jibbity jabs, and it's coming. And they put out these people, these people that are in generational curses to stalk us, so that we will comply, so that people are forced to comply with the mark of the beast. So this is very real. All this stuff, I didn't know any of this stuff. The first thing I started reading when I started, in 2020, and I started looking into a certain something because I didn't want to take it, because I already had some stuff going on, and I just researched it and I thought, oh, hell no, what? Because that agency I used to work for made me and I'm not bragging here, but I became a very good researcher regarding uncensored research. When I get something, I go down the rabbit hole, and that rabbit hole, even Grimm has to he had a while ago, he brought me back up because I had to discover for myself that there's no bottom. There is no bottom, and for me, it started begins with an A, adrena. Okay. Adrena. I won't say the rest of it. And also looking into that, what's in that, what I said, the jibbity dab, and I started researching and I was horrified. I told my friends, I'm going to digress for a second. I called up all my friends and I said, please don't take it. Please, 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 please don't. And they said, oh, that's just, don't worry. No. And I said, no, do not. And this was late 2020. I called all my friends and I said, listen, because I knew these are friends that I've had in my life for over 20 years. And they know that I have a very strong moral compass. And I said, please do not take this. I will send you the research that I'm looking into. And then they were saying, well, just send it over. And I sent it to them. And it was Dr. Robert Malone, what he was saying, all the Israel studies, what was coming back, which was very negative, very bad. And I was saying, look, and then my friends called me back. My two friends called me back and they said, well, do you think that this is just your trauma from that job? That maybe PTSD from that horrifying job you had working for the government? I said, no, but granted, that was a horrifying job that gave me PTSD. This is very real. And they were just like, well, we just think and they kind of just brushed it aside and I wouldn't let it go with them. And I said, guys, please. And they said, well, I'm digressing here, guys. And they said, oh, well, what are you, one of those anti-blank? And they said, well, who have you been talking to? And I said, and then they said, well, have you been talking to some extremists? And I was like, wait, what? And then they called me and I swear, I couldn't believe this because I've never been called this in my life. So they both called me. They said, and they said, what you're sounding like? You're sounding like a conspiracy theorist. And I said, I'm telling you, I was like, what? No, what, me? And it was like the worst thing that I could be called. I'm like, what are you talking, guys? What, me?
That's actually the best thing that you can be called because it means that you're a critical thinker and you don't buy into the bullshit.
Absolutely. But at the time, I'm just mortified, right? Because basically, I'm a sheeple. I hate to say it, but I became a sheeple falling back asleep after that horrendous job. And I was saying, guys, no, oh my God, don't call me. Guys, what are you talking about? I'm not a conspiracy theorist. That's awful. Why would you accuse me of being that? And then, they said, they lost them. I lost both of my friends because they didn't, they eventually told me they took it. They eventually told me they took it, and I said, look, we already took it and we don't want to talk about it. And we don't want to it's upsetting. You're upsetting us. And I was like, oh, and I just knew there was nowhere. It was just those strong friendships that I had ended, and I wasn't the one that, I even reached out to my friend in 2023 and I said, thinking, right. She took it in late 2020 and I said, well, how are you doing? And she said, yeah, well, no, I'm not, I'm doing good. And I said, yeah. And I said, and she said, hey, she called me by my name and I said, are you facing any kind of complications or anything? And she said, do you want me to? And I said, that's not the situation. I'm just wondering. I said, there's a lot of stuff that has come out. And she said, you know what? And she said this, I'll never forget it. She said, if I'm in the Matrix, leave me in the Matrix. And after she said, if I'm in the Matrix, leave me in the Matrix, I was just like, that was it. I said, okay, have a good day. And that was it. Never called her again, never talked to her again. That was a friend in my life for over 20 years. I don't even know how she is now. You know, so I've lost friends over this. Of also being a pretty darn good researcher, you know, and because I was trained to be, you know, I had to be a good researcher. You know, I had to. That's how they trained me. You know, and trust me, I'm not bragging about any of my training there. You know, it was just I had to be. I mean, I was a supervisor. I had to. There was things that I had to. They trained me in so that it would be that would be my specialty, right? I would be able to help people in that field, in that certain kind of bracket, or you know. So what I did with that training is this, you know, and I'm not saying I'm like this perfect person, but I'm very proud. My parents were very proud of me, and I used all my training working at that wretched job for the greater good. And I've remained on the right side of history, and no one is getting my soul. And I really mean that. And I'm not trying to be cheesy or anything like that, you know, because this is what it's about. It's about, we're in a battle for our souls. It's called transhumanism. We are in a battle for our souls. They want our souls, you know, and what is a soul? I can go into it with you guys. I don't want to, you know, go on, but it's, if you even look at the reviews, and if you even look at the reviews, yep, sorry.
I was going to say we're getting close to 3 hours, and we're doing fucking good, man.
Nice.
Oh, thank you guys.
We're doing good.
I really appreciate you
I
guys
ain't got
having
nowhere
me.
to be till tomorrow. To be honest with you, I mean, we can go all night. But moving forward a little bit, just to recap a little bit, to catch up anybody who might be tuning in late. You went to work for the TSA after 9/11, wound up with cancer, had some concerns. Pretty much, you were the alpha mama bear to your team and the corresponding teams that you worked with. Tiny Dick superiors that you worked with didn't like it. You, after a long haul, after everything with your cancer and everything, you ended up leaving the TSA and wound up a victim over the next several decades of being a victim of what is commonly referred to as gang stalking. And to catch up, you are now an independent activist speaking out, sharing your experiences with the world. Would you care to go into a little more detail as to what this has done to you personally, as far as in terms of lighting a fire under your ass, and what you are doing, basically what you are doing now to fight back against the injustices that you are seeing and are subsequently experiencing?
You know, it's very difficult to, you know, when I didn't know, you know, I thank you for recapping everything. I mean, this is such a, I really, you know, this has just been so therapeutic for me. And I feel like I sincerely hope that I haven't been going on and on and on. You know, it's just, you know, you know, I feel very passionate about that. They're not getting my soul, you know, because very much, you know, again, and I'll just say, and I would never, ever unalive myself. And it's very surreal to me. You asked it's very surreal to me that they are after people that, you know, this is turning into a situation where it's just pretty much all of humanity that is not in the club. And if you're not in the club, you know, they're leading into transhumanism. You know, the people you know, some of the people that even, and I'm going to, you know, I should say, I mean, I feel like I should say, oh, this is for entertainment purposes only, and this is allegedly, and this is supposedly, just so I want to make sure I'm being very protective of your channel, you know? But, you know,
Oh no, they know
that.
they know we're coming. They're scared of us. They don't like us because we let people like you talk. So, and I'm going to give you something else too. Stop worrying about them getting your soul. Don't ever worry about it anymore. I'm going to teach you something very powerful, and this is the whole little nonsense that I have, is that somewhere along the way, we lost track. We're not human bodies that have souls. We're not human beings that have souls. No. That's where we all got it twisted. We are souls that happen to be using a human body. So understanding that one basic thing is that they can't take it. That's taking you, the essence of who you are. They can't take you away from your creator, your God, the things in which that you choose to pray to and proselytize to. They can't take that aspect away from you. Now that is the lie, is that we have souls as though like it is a possession of ours that we have, where it's like, no, it is like you are the soul. And when you die,
To put it in a better term, Connor, look at it in terms of the caterpillar to the butterfly. You are not the cocoon in possession of a caterpillar. You are the caterpillar in the possession of a cocoon.
yes, sir.
Yes, absolutely. And this is when it's gonna get a little bit sci-fi, because I try to stay away from the kind of the stuff that sounds so crazy, that sounds so sci-fi. But this is why they keep us in a box, so they don't let us talk to people that. Oh, there's a. Okay. Oh, they don't let us. They purposely, as they're as these non-experimental, whatever, I don't like the labels that, targeted, persecuted, but it is what it is. I mean, it's not like I chose to be in this demonic program, but it's very dark. It is very, very dark. It's not just about, getting just direct energy weapons and getting, just the sheer. I'll go into this, like whistleblower Ann Casper. Okay, so Ann Casper was a whistleblower. She worked for Merrill Lynch, and what they did was they put her in the targeting program, and she was tortured. You can even find, Ann Casper, Merrill Lynch, and she won a lawsuit that made equal pay. I do believe it was equal pay for women. So she set a precedent with Merrill Lynch. And what they did was they tortured her. I don't know if it was Merrill Lynch per se, but she was placed in this targeted program. I can't tell you by who. And then suddenly she was tortured, and she was tortured to death. And she was such a strong advocate. And they tortured her. She ended up with stage 4 all through her body because of direct energy weapons. So it is very, very real. And they're trying to make it look like this is going to be Project Bluebeam with all the stuff that they're going to be happening regarding, hitting innocent people with these direct energy weapons. The first time I ever experienced one was at work, and I thought I just fainted. It was after an officer of mine in 2008 said to me, they want me to set you up. And again, remember, I was so full of spit and vinegar. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I really, for the most part, I loved the job because I loved the camaraderie of it. I loved that, a lot of my officers were miserable, right? I was miserable too there. I wasn't happy there, but I got to make them laugh, and I got to kind of pull them out of this. One of my officers, I'll never forget, he said, he came in one day and he was saying, he was telling me he was a funny guy. He was a very eccentric guy. He was a ham operator. Also, he did that. And he was also, he had his degree in engineering. So can you imagine, he ended up as a screener. So he really, he could have done so much better, but he was kind of trapped in that job. And he came in one day and he always used to joke with me. And he said, and I was the pushover. I was the supervisor that was a pushover, and I think that's how I got out of there alive, because I was a pushover. I can tell you how many people, I worked there well over 10 years, and the people that I wrote up, is on you had to be pretty damn bad for me to write you up, and because I didn't abuse that, and I never put one person on leave restriction. A leave restriction was another thing that the management would use against people, because they could upload your whole world, right? And supervisors had the power to put an officer they could take you off at 12:30, like a 12 o'clock starting time to ending time 2030, which is 8:30, to a suddenly, AM shift starting at 4:30, and then ending, going to 8.5 hours, and that can ruin, that can ruin so many people's lives, especially if you don't drive, so I've never, ever, and it wasn't easy. I didn't put one of my officers on leave restriction. So, and again, I can tell you, I wrote up I can tell you how many people that I wrote up on my right hand. It was like just because I knew, like, I would rather, and a lot of my officers knew that. They knew that I was so I got what's the word? I was a pushover. I became like, so what, this officer came in one day, and he was always joking. He had a very, very sarcastic attitude. And he comes in, and I'm getting my checkpoint ready. And we all, we had to wear uniform and stuff. And he would always joke with me, and he says, oh, I would joke with him back. He'd be like, oh, I know I'm out of uniform. And I'd joke with him. I'd say, well, you are, going up against HRM 735-1, superseded by HRM 1100-54-1, and he'd be like, oh, here we go. And they knew that I was going to be, I loved, again, I was so in it. I loved making them laugh. But then in this one particular day, we had this kind of exchange back and forth. And it was a jokingly, because I had a very good rapport with so many of my officers. And he said to me, he's like, I'm just having a bad day. And I said, well, I said, come into my office. What do you want to talk to me about? And he said, well, I just can't wait till I go for root canal. Can you imagine? He could not wait to get a root canal so that he would have a couple of days off from work. And I was just like, so I'm just thinking to myself, oh my Lord. And he said to me, I said, I am so sorry. It's so awful here. I mean, I was apologizing so much to my officers because I knew just how wretched that place was. And he, because I experienced it. I did everything they did. When I had my officers move bags and get bags out of the x-ray, I did everything they did. I just made sure that I wasn't the kind of officer that was going to sit on her ass. The only way I gained respect there was I went into the mix. I went into the mix just as much. I never asked them to do anything that I wasn't prepared to do myself, and also did myself. I did a lot. I thought I was going to have a heart attack getting out of that job. I really thought, before I even left that job, I thought, let me rephrase that. There was what I really thought I was going to have a heart attack at that job, because I was going in that job. That from the moment I hit that checkpoint, I was going. And, there was one point where I had to supervise over 500 officers, and it was just me. And that was in the beginning of my being stationed there, so, but, this guy comes in, he's talking about dreaming of his root canal so he can get out of work for a couple of days and escape this wretched place. And I said, I'm really sorry. And we kind of like, oh God, I cringed. Right. And he said, this is the place where dreams go to die. And I felt it. I felt like I really felt it. I felt it. And I just had to go back in my office and just close the door and just feel it, because he looked at me and his eyes were dead. His eyes were just so, he was just, this is a guy that, wasn't like that when he first got into this job, and it was just dead. It would just literally suck the life out of him. And when he said, he said, it's not you, he was saying, it's not you. It's nothing you did. I mean, this is just a dream. This is a job where dreams go to die, and it's just, and it was supposed to be a joke, but we both weren't laughing, because we knew that it was a job where dreams went to die, and a lot worse. Hope I'm not talking. I didn't mean to go on and on. I'm just trying to, so.
Yeah. This is pretty much your story. And at which point, you need to be able to tell it your way and share as much of it as you can. Getting back to my last question, expounding on that a little bit. You're telling your story here, and you have your StreamYard.
I just want to let you know you're cutting out, Tin Man. You're cutting out, Tin Man. You're just cutting out.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, perfect. You were saying getting back to...
Okay, getting back to my initial question. You're telling your story here, and you have your StreamYard that you do your podcast on. How much do you really expand on this story and what all has transpired since you went to work for the TSA till now?
This is one, I only have given my testimony one other place. I gave it to another woman that's targeted, and she has over 2,000 followers, and and I really felt, and I really like the way she's very diplomatic. I really think she's a class act, but and I at the time I was writing a series of emails to her just to kind of I was trying to process what was happening to me, and I'm writing her, and I'm just like I didn't know what was happening to me. and I didn't really was like, I was trying to figure out, just trying to wrap my head around, like, what is this? Like, what is the solutions? Like, how do we get out of this? This is terrible. I mean, but everywhere I started to research, it was like, okay, well, this is going to be happening to so many, it's already opened up to civilians, but this is going to be by, this is basically Agenda 2025. This is like, now they're slowly, and not even slowly, I would say they are, as we speak, they are getting this to happen. They are busing in people from other countries. And now it's not even, of course, with my quote unquote gang stalkers, right? With the community organized stalkers that stalk me, I can tell you, I started, and I don't want to get too far from your question. I did give my testimony, but it was read by a woman that, again, also being targeted, and she's been going through this, I think, for about 10 years now. It's just horrifying what they've been doing to her. It's been like, just not that it's not, I mean, she is just a very strong woman, incredible badass. But, she has been going through this.
Would you care to plug her? Give her a shout out?
Sure. She was at Alternative Homesteading, and her name is Lorraine from Alternative Homesteading. And I gave my testimony to her. She's, she's got a lot of Freemasons and Eastern Stars. Same thing, same stalkers I have, all over across the board, though, from the secret societies. I can't even tell you who the Pied Pipers are. I'll tell you, there's just so many groups that are in this. It's called the network. So there, it's not just programs, right? It's not this people that are gang stalkers. It's a whole network of people. It's a network of Freemasons. It's a network of Eastern Stars. It's a network of people in the occult. It's a network of Luciferian New Age, women that are into the occult and practice witchcraft, and men that practice warlock. They practice all that stuff, black magic, and they all, they're secret clubs. There's clubs where they meet. They look like your regular average club, but it can usually stay open to 3 a.m., 4 a.m. because they got the town in the back pocket. It's again, I mean, there is such a thing as blue Illuminati, and people can look up what the blue Illuminati is. It's very real. But I can't, I don't have any fear anymore, because again, that's what I mean by walking dead woman. I think, we all have to be courageous, especially now, especially when I do believe they're trying to simulate revelations. They're trying to, these parasitic elite are trying to bring upon revelations. They're trying to bring upon the end times, so, the scary part is that, and I told my testimony in emails to her, and I just said, you can release them. And she released my testimony. And pretty much that was the only place I said to my testimony other than here. So my StreamYard that I started with Grim is that, and he's just been amazing. He's been incredible. I mean, I started this idea, and then, he got on board because he's a very strong, this is what they do with the thought pattern here. He's a very strong ally, very, very strong ally. So here's the thing, what they've been doing though, I want it to be, Sunday, I have I'll say, they're friends, and, his video, he's a targeted individual. He's been through hell. His girlfriend has been through hell. His name is David Atkins, and he has a channel, David A. And if you subscribe to David A., you'll hear a bunch of really hard stories. You'll hear, stories that are all across the board from different people, and that are being targeted, that have been placed in this program, that have been placed in this slow kill program. And they're, just like me, trying to warn innocent, other innocent people that this is coming to them. They have perfected this now. That's the scary thing. And people can't fall back into cognitive dissonance and think that this is not going to happen to them, because unfortunately it is. And they started, what they did was a distraction, is they put out that, what they put out in 2020, and they wanted a depopulation, okay? And that's what we're in right now, event. And now, they got people And now they have people that don't even know that they're stalked. They're in the what we call what we call in the community as the covert stalking part. And when you're being covert like I was for 22 years, I didn't know. It's just gathering data on you. Constant gathering data on you. They put people in your life. They'll just, it's so much sporadic stuff. Everybody's targeting can be different as well. But some targeting is like it is mirrored after what's called, let me bring it up here, Zerzet song. And I'm going to spell it Z-E-R, Zerzet Zung, Zerzung. And right now, as we speak, they are funneling out this. I can give you a very good example, but they are funneling out this to all of humanity. All of humanity. So Zersetzung is the German word for decomposition, and quote unquote disruption. Okay, so it was a psychological warfare technique used by the quote unquote Ministry for State Security, quote in parentheses Stasi, to repress political opponents in East Germany. During the 1970s and 1980s, Zersetzung served to combat alleged and actual dissidents through covert means, using secret methods of abusive control, and psychological manipulation to prevent anti-government activities. Among the defining features, and I don't want to be, I'm keeping it short. Among the defining features of it was widespread use of offensive counter-espionage methods as a means of repression. People were commonly targeted on a preventive basis to limit or stop activities of political dissent and cultural incorrectness that they may have gone on to perform and succeed, and not on the basis of crimes that they actually committed at all. It was all psychological operations, the most demonic kind. So they said, so it goes on just to say, Zersetzung methods were designed to break down, undermine, and paralyze people behind the quote unquote facade of social normality in a form of quote unquote silent repression. And this is where we are at. This is where we were at. They have now that they have pushed this out, they have mirrored it. All of these, so many of these alphabet agencies were, it's just, why 9/11 had to happen, because then they had to bring in the Transportation Security Administration that would poop out the Department of Homeland Security, and then the Department of Homeland Security would poop out, the Patriot Act. And then more and more, we would start to lose, right, our freedoms under the guise of, well, what do you have to hide? If you don't have anything to hide, you shouldn't have to worry, right? All that bullshit. And then that bullshit, if you see something, say something. And all of that Nazism. That's what that was. This is Nazism. This is what it is. And it's here in 2025. And they're now they are, the grid's in place. The New World Order's here. And now they're just they have people that I can tell you, if you have been, and it's hard to hear, but cognitive dissonance is very, very different. It's very dangerous, because once you have this information, the thing is, you especially when you're in the covert surveillance stage, which is so many people are. I'll give you an example, like Burlington, Vermont. Do you know about Burlington, Vermont? Have you ever been there? Do you know the politics behind Burlington, Vermont? Just asking you guys.
I have not been there, but I have heard of it, and at least in passing. I don't know the finite details, but go ahead and elaborate.
Yeah, well, Burlington, Vermont, I since I've been in this targeted program, especially overt, right? Because that's when I started to really develop the eyes to see and the ears to hear, and really start to understand things. And then I, read a book called Behold the Pale Horse by Milton William Cooper. And we all know what happened to him. He was the guy that tried to ring the bell, and he was trying to tell people, you're going to be out, wake up, everybody, wake up, young people. You're all becoming apathetic. Wake up, wake up, wake up, and become the resistance. Get courage. This is what he always used to say, Milton William Cooper. He always used to say, find your courage. You guys got to find your courage and wake up. And what they did is he ended up with 8 bullets in his body because he was trying to warn people. He had access. He was a whistleblower. He had access. He was a naval intel, and he had access to a lot of intel. And it describes in great detail. And I urge people to check out the audio version. It's heavily censored, but they've heavily censored it. But if you find it on Rumble, it still will be heavily censored. But they left the part out with the jibbity jab where he warns people about the jibbity jab, and they left that out. But he warns people exactly what's happening now, and he did it almost 30 years ago. So, they're trying to whitewash everything. They're trying to take everything down of Milton William Cooper's. And he also went by William Cooper. So the book, again, is called Behold a Pale Horse. And again, what he talked about in that book is a lot of the top secret information that he was privy to. And, it does kind of dabble in UFO stuff and everything. But he does say regarding all that stuff, he doesn't know if they dropped some crumbs for him to go in the wrong direction. But he was pretty much spot on about what was about to happen here in the year 2025. And here this guy is, and this was in the late 90s that he was putting this out, warning us. So he was he was a superhero. He's one of my superheroes. He was just such a hero, such a strong guy, just a courageous guy. And they ended up killing him for it. He knew he was going to die. He lived in this house on the mountain. He sent he staged this whole thing where he had a fight with his wife so that it would look like he was divorcing her, wanted no part of her, wanted no part of his children. He did that to save their lives. And then he lived there alone because he knew he didn't want to put them in jeopardy. And they eventually came for him. They eventually, he had his own radio program. They eventually came for him, and he ended up with 8 bullets in his body. But he warned us and here we are. What he talked about in the book, Behold a Pale Horse, is exactly what we are going through now. And I can tell you though, it's much, much worse. Much, much worse. Because he doesn't talk about what Project Soul Catcher did with Dr. Robert Duncan. Dr. Robert Duncan, because he knows, because that monster created V2K. That monster created, I do believe, right? Remote neuromonitoring, where they can read our thoughts, like Mission Impossible. They can have this, community policing, right? They can all this, and I'm the beta. I'm the beta tester for all that bullshit. I'm the beta tester, where all this nanoparticles, nanotechnology going that we're inhaling, right? That's a self-assembling inside our bodies. Well, the game was, right, that they were trying to do, and that they have all these technologies. This is fallen angel technology. This is what it is. And a lot of these Freemasons, a lot of these celebrities, a lot of them are Freemasons and Eastern Stars. They had this technology, especially the technology where these monsters and the higher ups, right? These people in unjust, these positions of power that they never should have, that they're able now to not only just read our thoughts, right? Collect our data, read our thoughts, and read and look out our eyes. Because this nanotechnology is assembling inside of us, and it's assembled inside of our eyes. And I can even tell you how you can see it in your eyes. I mean, there's this, given that individual, that mentally ill guy, one of the reasons why I started watching him is, because he had a YouTube page and he was being targeted. But I do think he's a failed, he's a predator now, a TI predator. I think he's a targeted person, 100%. I think he is. But I do believe he's a predator. I do believe that's why he's a plant. He's a broken plant. He's a fraud. And so I think he's like a sleeper cell. They've activated him because he's a one-man wrecking ball in the TI community, and he loves it. This person, and they put the perfect psychopath on it. I can tell you, the DHS, he would be the DHS's best weapon. They would love. He's the DHS's best weapon. I can honestly tell you he's their best weapon, because he has done so much damage in people's lives, and he's not even done. And he's done this while being a homeless transient down in Jacksonville, North Carolina, up against a tree, a pea-riddled tree, And because he sits there with this broken cell phone and and I'm telling you, he's a hacker. He's very good at computers. So he knows how to destroy people's lives. He knows how to gang stalk them. He knows how the smear campaigns. He knows how to take channels down. This is why he baits me so much, digressing for a second. This is why he does the narcissistic baiting to me, right? Because he wants me to talk about him. And then what does he do? Report, because he wants to silence me. He wants to take down my channel because he's in on this. I think he's part of this bullshit. And again, it's not just that he has demons riddled throughout his body, which I do think he does. But, when I first how I met him is that I had a very scared video out there that I put out there I put it out in the summer of 2024 when I was first being gang stalked, right? Whatever, community organized policing. And Grim, I think you got your camera, you got your mic on, I think.
I wanted to say this too.
Okay. Sorry, Grim. I didn't mean to. I thought you had your mic on by accident. I just refrained from saying.
He's going to do this no matter what. But the thing is, he's one guy. But as the Anonymous Collective, we're worldwide. We're so global. We could actually have our own country. So over here, you're good. You're safe with us. We have your back. And over here with us, you have nothing to worry about.
I appreciate that. A lot of the people that are running this show, they are, they are absolute lunatics. They are psychopaths that are doing this to us. And they are narcissists. And this guy sitting, rotting, and, looking to find other targeted females to victimize, like he did with me, like he did with the other woman down Jacksonville, North Carolina. I mean, she got him down there, and this guy's she said she made a big mistake. She's regretting it all the time. She's regretting it. And what does he do? He says, he goes on these streams morning, noon, and night, bitching about me, trying to discredit me, trying to say I'm this double agent or whatever. And he's just a nut. He's a complete nut job, and, I feel bad for her because now this turd, and I'm sorry, he's a turd. He's stuck in Jacksonville, he's in Jacksonville, North Carolina, and she's kind of stuck with him. I got him out of my town as the best $304 I ever spent in my life is get him away from me and get him on a bus. But, again, he took that money and instead of going back to the Jackson, Michigan, the shelter where he belongs, he, now he's infesting her town. And again, he does these streams. I've exposed this guy, he was, from Kentucky. And I wish I could say his name, but I won't even give him that because I don't want to do what he did to me, even though he puts out his Cash App all the time with his name on it. I don't want to give him a reason to hit report and trying to take this channel down because that's what he'd try to do. But he's obsessed. He wants to be a YouTube superstar. This is how nuts he is. Here he is, he wants to be a YouTube superstar. He wants all this, again, he's incredibly irrelevant. But he thinks he's like in his grandiose, narcissistic, covert, narcissistic incel mind, he's this incredible guy that everybody wants to hear from him. And he's smarter than anybody else in the room. And, in the parking lot at Walmart in Jacksonville, North Carolina. He's the smartest guy in the parking lot,
and if he was so damn smart, what the hell is he doing homeless? What a joke.
Well, because
and we're not even going to mention his name. Don't mention his name.
Yeah.
He's not deserving of the recognition.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I'm not going to, drop his channel because it's all about, doxing me. It's all about trying to get me killed and, all about lying, all about trying to, assassinate my character, assassinate my good name. I mean, and it's just so disgusting that anybody would even believe that thing, because he's just it's so obvious that he's, he hasn't literally, he hasn't had a shower since April 15th. When he came here, I was very good to him. But by the fifth day, I set boundaries and got him out of my ass. Got him out of my house. I mean, this asshole. I mean, I was making his dinner, his breakfast, his lunch. I gave him new clothing. I gave him some birthday presents. And constantly he had resting bitch face. This guy was just, and I literally on the 5th day after trying to appease this guy by everything except sexually, and I wasn't going there ever. And I think that's what he was pissed about. So that's why he's got a rank on my looks and rank on my body and blah, blah, blah. While meanwhile, this guy has, a deformed body. It's just insane. It's like, and I get it, a double standard and stuff, because I have, I've gained 15 pounds, but my Lord, if anybody has been through the stress I have, I give myself grace, because I've been through a lot. That little midget, that little turd could never have gone through what I have been through in my life and still be alive, and again, he's turned to, he said he used to be a practicing Satanist. And I think that once you open up that door, it never closes, so I think that he's on a mission from, he's got, again, every time he speaks, he does this and he wants to take my channel down, all this stuff. And I just got to say to myself, not today, Satan, not today, Satan, because I have God in my side. I have unwavering faith in God, and he has no faith at all except in himself, just like Lucifer. He says he has no faith at all, but I do believe I think he's still that practicing Satanist, because he's probably one of the most, and let me tell you, I have met a lot of evil people in my life. Okay. He's one of the most evil people, the most damaging people I've ever met in my life. People that give him Cash App money, because he loves the sound of his own voice. People that give him Cash App money, he actually knows a way to find out who they are, find out their real name, their real location, and hit them up when he's desperate. Can you imagine? These are people that have actually been stupid enough to give him money through his Cash App. So he's a little monster. I mean, he looks at people as utensils. He looks at them as tools that he can use, because he's a typical narcissistic. He's a typical narc. He's a typical narc. And I do believe, I'm hell bent on, I'm hell bent on I'm not going to be intimidated by this freak. I refuse to be intimidated by this monster. Refuse. He can dox me nothing I can do. He's going to do it. I got to give it to God, but it's, again, this is what I think is going to happen with him. So I can get back to talking about the really important stuff. And because he's irrelevant, he's extremely irrelevant. He's a pathetic clown trying to be irrelevant. But, this stuff is very, I'm not even going to go there, because I know he's going to enjoy this, because again, narcissists they love bad attention, good attention, any kind of attention, but this program,
Give him any more attention than we already have. Let's shift away from that. You were talking about the Satanism in regards to this person and a lot of the gang stalkers that you have faced in the past. I want to say this to
your mic is acting up, man. Your mic again. It's going on and on.
Somebody tried to call me earlier, and I'm not on speaker anymore, so I don't know what the hell happened. It took me off a speaker, so I'm on general talk now.
Okay,
but am I coming through better now?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yeah, I'm trying to talk a little bit louder, so if I'm like up in the mic, that's why. But talking about all this Satanism and people involved in witchcraft and all this gang stalking, those types of people, those narcissists, they're obsessed with the occult. And a warning to any listeners out there who might be considering getting into witchcraft or dabbling in it, or anybody who's been dabbling in it on a low level. Yeah, you can pick up your little books at your local store, at your local Walden's or whatever, but you don't really know what the fuck you're getting into, if I'm being completely honest with you. I grew up in that shit. My mother was a Wiccan priestess. I grew up around druids. My birth is a product of witchcraft. I was born of the dark arts. And that is not something I like to talk about, but it's a reality. People don't understand. People who dabble in this shit and play around with it, they're playing with fire. And the biggest illusion the biggest magic that you're fucking with is the illusion of control. Most people who dabble in this stuff are people they feel that their lives has spiraled out of their control. So they turn to magic, they turn to witchcraft, they turn to spiritualism, not knowing what they're getting into. And the low-level shit, that's just the illusion of control. But the deeper you dig, the more shit you're going to find. And then you're going to find these organizations and these types of people. And whether you're one of those kind of people or not is irrelevant. You're going to come across those types of people. And if you're not one of those types of people, they are going to eat you alive. They are going to fuck with you on a level both physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually on a level that you cannot even comprehend.
You are not
So
kidding.
my advice,
Absolutely. Yes.
stay the fuck away from that shit. I understand, you want to be in control of your lives, but the deeper you dig down that rabbit hole, the harder life is going to get.
No, you ain't kidding. You ain't kidding. And I didn't even know there was such a thing as Luciferian, New Age Luciferian witches and warlocks. It sounds like some kind of bad joke, but I can tell you, I mean, that's the woman that, regarding the situation I have with, some things that that I was trying to get ahead on, like certain things like, physically, and that I wanted to see somebody, a physical therapist that could kind of work out the problem, professionally. She, turned out to be a Luciferian New Age witch, and she had been into witchcraft for a very long time. She was from New Mexico, and not throwing any shade there at all, but her mother was also a witch from Mexico. And, this person, I didn't know anything. I was very just ignorant regarding witchcraft, regarding anything to do with witchcraft and Satanism and warlocks. And I didn't want to know any of that shit, nothing. It just seemed so dark and just nothing that I wanted. But I'm telling you, ignorance was not bliss. So if they just got, and I don't say this lightly, they just got too eager, and Grimm knows this. They just got too eager. All this covenant of witches and warlocks, they got too eager with trying to kill me. They got too eager because I think I still have a hit on my life. I know I do, but they got too eager with trying to make me a victim of my own demise. Just an accident that may have oops, may have happened in my vehicle. This is what they did, and I think they started to salivate a little bit too much because they were doing all this triangulation with me because it was just all this nonstop gossip, all this pack of this evil demonic covenant, and I didn't know anything about covenants or anything, and that shit is nothing to play with, it was just I have unwavering faith in God. And I say, there's a prayer that I say, and I won't even say it on the screen. I won't even say it on this video. I'm very protective with my prayers. I pray for people. I pray for certain people in my life. And I believe in the power of prayer. I believe in blessing my house. I mean, I had, I believe, and this is why I feel like, for the most part, I really do feel like I've been protected. And because I can tell you, I missed death. Oh, I don't know how I did it, but there's a lot of situations that I almost died, and it was by nothing that I did myself. And for somehow, God, it was basically, I really do believe it was God, that I have this bigger purpose, that I didn't even think so. And I really do believe, I look back on it now, and I think this has given me a lot of a newfound, added to my purpose. Because, even though, you think that, I'm done with this world, it's all set, I don't want any more, this is crazy, and you're thinking about checking out, whatever you do, do not. We must endure to the end, no matter what, because I strongly feel, I don't believe in unaliving. I don't believe in any of that. I believe that that's a setup, that's a trap to get you straight to, I really do believe, I think it is a trap to get you straight to hell. And this is why these demonic witches, they want to, if you look at Alternative Homesteading, her channel, she has a bunch of Covenant, Freemason, Eastern Stars. They're making her life a living hell. I mean, they've killed. Can you imagine? They went into her. She takes care of animals, right? She loves animals, and she's a lover of cats, and she has a Freda's cat rescue, and they keep dropping off these Eastern Stars, these Freemasons keep dropping off cats on her estate, on her property. And because trust me, she's in Kentucky and she's trying to get the hell out of here, hell out of there, because it's so bad. But they literally, what they did was, I don't know if I told you guys this, but it was so horrifying. They do all this stuff to her animals, but this was just recently. They snuck in the night and they blinded her kittens, 4 6-week-old kittens. And they damaged their eyes, kittens, and 2 of them died. And she had them on screen. One of them was dying and he could gasp for air, and it was horrifying. I couldn't even watch. But they're monsters. They are demonic. They are just demonic. They have no empathy. And like this individual who's rotting in Jacksonville, North Carolina, it's just, I'm telling you, when he was making fun of me for having cancer and, enjoying it and saying, oh, I'm glad that happened to you on stream. And he's getting closer to the camera. And I'm telling you, I could see demons in that boy. I could see demons riddled in that boy, and when I got him out of my house, I blessed my whole house with holy oil, because it is nothing to mess with. I just want to make sure there's somebody in the chat. I just don't want to make sure it's called his name, and he's been chat. I don't know how you guys handle this, because the chats that kept coming in, one of them is Furry Vegan Friend, and he says that he's going through this as well. So he writes, I'd love to be interviewed. I'm being gang stalked. I believe it's my mom and ex. My mom did this to me, to my stepdad as well, and he killed himself in 2024. Same year.
This is one of those people?
Yeah, and no, and he says same year my gang stalking started. So it sounds like this guy is been placed into this slow kill program. But again, you guys, you always trust.
Okay, so this is not one of the people that's been gang stalking you.
No, this is no. This is I don't know. But this is a guy that's just in the chat. I've never heard of Furry Vegan Friend.
I've screenshot their information. I'm going to be contacting them later.
Okay, got it. Because I was going to put up my YouTube page that I have, and it's do you feel like I should do that now, Tin Man, or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Go ahead and promote your channel and your stream and what time they can find you. Go ahead and
sure. It's
give us your plug right now.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. It's Targeted by Narcs, and I'm on YouTube. That's the channel of my name, Targeted by Narcs, and it is, and me and Graham host something, a StreamYard, where we want to hear from other individuals that are going through this. We want to, I'm trying to have others, if they want, right? If they want, and they always need to trust but verify who they're talking to. They never want to fall into a situation I have with this monster in North Carolina. So always verify, always make sure, if you're meeting somebody offline, I mean, you got to be so careful and make sure you know them. Like you really, I'm all for it. After meeting this monster, I'm all for background checks. I'm all for doing background checks and really making sure somebody is who they say they are, so that you can be safe and you don't end up dead. Because this is
absolutely.
We have hits on we do. We have hits on our head. This is a real situation, and they're trying to get everybody in it that's not in the club. And and I want to talk about real briefly only 2 subjects that I don't want to forget. It's Myron May and also Burlington, Vermont, because that will shed some light on your question that you asked. You asked me when is this going to happen to your average citizen, right? When is this going to take place? When is this going to be rolled out? Well, it's already been rolled out. And now they're going now it's accelerated, and one place can give you so since I have a new pair of eyes and a new pair of ears to hear with, I've seen, I was watching a show, and this guy had millions. He's one of these, what do you call it? He's one of these people that are controlled opposition. And I was watching his show, and he's got millions of viewers. And he was he was focusing on a town called Burlington, Vermont in New England. And I saw things that stood out because of I'm being overtly stalked, and I know what to look for. But the average person who's just being covertly stalked, and I can tell you most everybody's being covertly stalked. You just don't know yet, especially if you're a truther, if you have something, I hate to say it, like a channel like this, I mean, if you are speaking truth to power, if you've been out there courageously saying, you know, F the system and this is all messed up and it's rigged, then they already got their sights on you. You know, it's like Edward Snowden said, and I want to go back to Burlington, Vermont, but it's like, you know, I was watching something, an interviewer in 2013 interview Edward Snowden. And the interviewer asked, the journalist asked Edward Snowden, who was saying all of these things that were just, I mean, this guy, you could tell this journalist was scared for Edward Snowden's life, right? And he was saying, well, and he said at the end of the interview, he said, well, you know, Mr. Snowden, what is the worst thing that you could see happening? And remember, this was 12 years ago, in 2013. And he said, what is the worst thing that could happen with you? Here you are, you're risking your life, you're a whistleblower, you know, you're putting your life in danger, you're telling people that, you know, they're under surveillance and this is what's been going on and everybody's being surveyed. And what do you think about, like, what's your worst nightmare from this? And what could happen? What's the worst thing that could happen? And Edward Snowden, instead of saying, well, instead of him saying, well, I could be kidnapped, I could be killed, he didn't say all that. He looked at the journalist, didn't miss a beat, didn't flinch, and said that people won't care. And here we are.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And that's one reason why I have such reservations with Trump. Why hasn't Edward Snowden been pardoned by the Trump administration? Why has Trump not addressed the issues that Edward Snowden brought to light and sacrificed everything for to let the American people know? Why has he not even done anything in terms of policy to reverse the loss of rights that we have suffered post 9/11? He's not done these things. Yeah, a lot of people could argue that he's done some good, but
I tell you why.
These are key things. Go ahead, Reverend.
I tell you why. He could have done this. He could have pardoned Snowden during his first term. The reason he didn't do it was a political reason. And here we are, we're in his second term. He ain't gonna do it. He won't do it.
Exactly, and it's not like he can run for re-election. So what's he gotta lose politically at this point? You know, there's so much good that can be done. And you know, he's talked recently, we covered this in the roundtable a few weeks ago, about all these new technologies and whatnot. Yeah. Much of which entails what we've been talking about here. Why is he not addressing the issue that this is being used on the American people? That's criminal shit. At which point, if that's the CIA operations right there, or regardless of who's responsible and what agency is responsible, that's grounds enough to have that funding cut and have legislation put to paper that says this agency, due to its corruption, is bye-bye.
Do you think he'll bring back Glass-Steagall? No, he wouldn't. Do you think he'll Glass-Steagall is what keeps the banks in line, as well as the other corporations in line.
I mean, there's so many things I could go into.
Yeah, that one where that Obama ended up repealing that the news can do propaganda now.
Yeah, and he's not addressed that. He's not doing anything about any of the things that really fucking matter. Oh yeah, I'm taking on the deep state. I'm Donald Trump. Okay, yeah, you may be doing a nice little recovery on the economy that's like moving slower than a fucking snail, and you uncovered Democratic corruption. But where are the fucking things that really fucking matter? Where are you really killing the fucking deep state and the globalist system? Where have you really fucking killed it to where once Trump's out of office, it's not back to business as usual? No. We're nowhere near that fucking point.
And I'm getting kind of pissed off that nobody fucking calls it out. And I'm
The
sorry, I'm kind of
absolute
getting on a
worst.
side tangent here, but it is what
Hey,
it is.
bro, the absolute worst promise he ever made: get Hillary. He had no plans of
Yeah.
getting that bitch.
No, he ain't getting her. He ain't. I mean, I said it earlier. Newsom's a fucking criminal. The evidence is there. You subpoena any fucking fire marshal, and that's enough to gain a conviction on Newsom. Easy. But Pam Bondi ain't fucking had him indicted. Why?
No.
Because she ain't fucking interested in that, and neither is Trump. Because if Trump were interested in that, he wouldn't be sitting there saying, "Oh, Gavin Newsom's just an idiot. He doesn't know what he's doing." No, Gavin Newsom is a fucking criminal. If Trump wasn't in on it, he would fucking call it for what it is, and he would say, "Pam Bundy, you go arrest this motherfucker right now, or you're fired." And I think we lost our interviewee.
Also, she's okay.
Okay. We can go ahead and call it if you want. We've only got like 10 minutes left to the hour. So why don't we
Okay.
just go ahead and call it, and you can follow up with her later. I
We can do
mean,
that.
we pretty much covered what essentially could be considered her life story and her life's work at this point.
Yeah.
I strongly encourage her to keep up the good work. Reverend, would you mind giving her a plug on another plug on her YouTube for her YouTube channel and where they can find her, when her live streams are, so on and so forth?
If you want to see the StreamYard feed, is Sunday night. This Sunday, it's youtube.com/targeted by narcs, and it is it's worth to go see. It's worth to share your story, and give her a helping hand, and subscribing to our channel. But when you go to the Sunday feed, please be respectful, and less is more.
Yeah, definitely. And next week we're gonna do a little bit of a dive into some of the stuff that we can find just off the top of the fucking mountain here. Just do a Google search and see what comes up.
Google will not do that.
People who are getting gang stalked, just what
The
comes
thing
up.
is about Google will not show you anything that you want to research, because they're hiding shit like that. Your best bet
I've actually
is
found quite a bit. And I'm going to share a little bit of what I found next week.
Okay.
We can share some of those stories, and encourage those people to come forward with your friend and do a full deep dive on her show.
Comment here. We got a comment.
What do we got?
She got disconnected.
Not to worry. We can have you back on another time. Targeted. You're good. Again, next week we're gonna touch base on some of the stories that are published online. I've found quite a few, and they're very interesting and like very fucked up. Like, I was blown away. Like, I was blown away by today's broadcast, but I was particularly blown away by some of the stuff I found online. And I'm going to share a little bit of that next week, and we can do a deeper dive into that.
This was what I was partially mentioning in the first 3 episodes this year.
Yeah. Yeah, this is really happening a lot and in ever increasing capacity. And it's something that needs to be addressed. And if Trump is on our side, he needs to address it and nip that shit in the fucking butt and start being our president.
Another comment. She says, "Thank you for having her on. Greatly appreciate it."
Greatly appreciate you too. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us. For real, that is very powerful, because if we don't
stand up and speak the truth, then we truly are victims, and it's just going to continue, and the body count is just going to climb higher and higher. The more we talk about it, the more we expose it, the more we get it out there, the quicker a solution will present itself. People are at the point where they've had enough of this shit. They're tired of being the victim of the system, regardless of what the system does. And they're starting to get some pushback. And people want to say that Donald Trump's on our side. If he's not, the American people are going to make him. Or there's going to be bad news.
She says you're very welcome.
Yes, you are very welcome as well. And we it's time to take this country back. It's time to take this world back. If Donald Trump's on our side, it's time to push him in that direction and make him go the direction we want him to go, rather than what his globalist handlers are trying to do. But in order for us to do that, we've got to speak up. We got to speak loud. We got to drown out the demonic. No matter how wild they talk, we got to talk louder. Not just
that, but also put his feet to the fire.
Oh, yeah. Definitely put his feet to the fire. Like I said, push him in the right direction. We are not the tip of the spear.
I would say
Alex
right
Jones
now,
says he's the tip of the spear. Yeah, Alex Jones says he's the tip of the spear. We're the hand on the spear guiding its path, making sure it hits its mark. And the only way we can do that is to speak up loud and clear.
Exactly.
So
I can say this right now. We are at 3 hours, 55 minutes, and almost 40 seconds.
Yeah.
This is the longest. This is the longest we've ever been on. But tell you what, again, today this was monumental, not just for us, but for her as well.
Yes. This is the first time she told the story live.
She told the story without any interruptions, and it was good. Almost about 4 hours. Tell you what, we did it. We survived. She survived this well. Tell you what, Sunday night going to be even awesome too, man. I'll tell you what.
Hell yeah! Anybody who wants to check her out and wants to hear about these stories or has a story to share themselves, definitely check her out. Again, YouTube, Targeted by Narcs, live Sunday night. About what time Sunday night, Brevin?
It would be about 9 o'clock my time.
So that would be Pacific Standard Time.
Yeah.
9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Sunday evenings. Targeted by Narcs on YouTube.com. Does she have a social media platform like X, Facebook, or anything like that you want to plug?
She has Facebook.
Not a personal Facebook, but like a promotional channel like our X channel?
No,
she doesn't have anything like that. Yeah, we don't want to share her personal stuff.
No.
But yeah, definitely check her out. YouTube, Targeted by Narcs, and definitely check us out on YouTube and also on X at Real TWWRN.
7. Okay, she says 7 p.m. Eastern time, so that'll be about 4 o'clock my time.
All right, there we go. We got it cleared up. We got that cleared up. On behalf of Targeted by Narcs, on behalf of John Connor, what do you got?
Hold on. Okay, she says Sunday. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So,
Darling, we'll be there. I'll be doing my duty as a mod and a co-host. It's gonna be fun playing whack-a-mole.
Always gotta love whacking them moles.
Oh yeah,
man. I'm gonna go ahead and call it. It's nearly 4 hours.
Can I do this? I've been wanting to do this. All right, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Reverend Ordo. And this is the TWWRN, and also my good buddy and good brother Tin Man. If you're the Resistance, we're all the Resistance. And if you ain't down with that, we got 3 words for you: go fuck yourself. I'll be here all day.
Very
Peace.
nice.
All right, man.